And where
stalk
is
you.
this?
The cemetery.
You can go earlier so that it's not dark.
I think it's. It's all nature. Oh yes.
Just thinking
Like
about
a
it.
medallion or?
I was just on my email card. Oh, I know.
Good evening, and calling the meeting to order. Welcome to the West Hartford Public Schools Board of Education meeting. It is Tuesday, September the 16th, 2025. Amani, may you please call the roll?
Mr. Gagnon,
Here.
Mr. Goldman,
Here.
Dr. Harris,
Here.
Mrs. Nassarella,
Present.
Dr. Thomas-Farquharson,
Here.
Mrs. Yagaloff,
Present.
Bridget Feeney,
Present.
Miss Merriman,
Present.
Kayla Jaw.
Here.
All right, thank you. And Bridget, may you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do not have a revision to the agenda order. Now it is time for public communications. This is an opportunity where we're able to hear from you, your thoughts, your questions, your suggestions, your concerns. Each individual is allowed 3 minutes to speak. We ask when you come to the podium to please share your name and your town of residence. Please also be mindful of Amani, who will hold up a yellow card when you have 1 minute remaining in your time. And when your time is expired, you will see a red card. We ask for you please to conclude your sentence and respectfully take your seat at that time. Please be aware that we are attentively listening. However, it is policy that we do not respond to comments as they are being made. We do have a sign-up sheet. However, no one has signed up. But we'll ask if there's anyone here who cares to make a public comment. Is there anyone here who cares to make a public comment? Seeing none, we shall continue with the agenda. Moving on to non-staff communications and reports. This is where we're able to hear from our student representatives. So may we start with Kayla, please, sharing about Hall.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be back with another update from Hall. I'd like to begin by recognizing 3 of our seniors who were recently announced as National Merit Scholar semifinalists, meaning that these students scored in the top 1% of all Connecticut seniors who took the PSAT last October. We wish them the best as they move forward in the competition. Sports are also in full swing. Our first home football game against South Windsor was a big success. Hall won 27-18, and it was great seeing the pep band, cheerleaders, and students all coming together. Other fall sports are also off to a strong start, with boys golf, girls swimming, and volleyball competing today. Tomorrow evening is our annual curriculum night. Parents will come in to follow their students' schedule and have the opportunity to meet teachers. Meanwhile, this fall also marks the start of a new chapter for student government, as we welcome a new faculty advisor. In addition, the school counseling department has launched senior workshops to support the post-graduation planning process, while freshmen have begun their seminar program to ease the transition into high school. Both programs will help students feel supported at these very important stages. We've also taken this month to reflect as a community. Last week, Hall observed and memorialized 9/11, and tomorrow students will learn about Constitution Day through community lessons. Looking ahead, the PSAT will be administered on October 9th for all students in grades 9, 10, and 11. As you can see, the school year is already getting very busy. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Bridget, may you please share what's going on at Conard?
Hi, in case you forgot, my name is Bridget Feeney, and I'm your representative from Conard. This past week, Conard was hyped for both our Spirit Week and our pep rally, the kickoff to the school year. A huge shout out to Mr. Melian, our head pep rally organizer, Mrs. Casillas, our assistant organizer, and Mr. Sikorsky, our MC. Special shout outs to students Juliana Farquharson, chair of the school's Spirit Committee, and Neela Feeney, our music tech, who both worked alongside our amazing student volunteers to make it a success. And last but not least, a huge thank you and welcome to our new cheer coach, Savannah, for all her work in creating a new cheer and dance routine. Today, we celebrated our new mural. The event brought together students who contributed to the project for members of Rise Up for the Arts and representatives for the CT Center of Nonviolence. The celebration took place outdoors and was at the back of the school near the bus drop-off area right near the mural. The event was also recorded to be shared during our community tomorrow. We invite all parents and caregivers to Conard's annual curriculum night tomorrow, Wednesday, September 17th. The event will begin at 6:30 in the auditorium with the administrative team. Immediately following these short introductions, parents will follow their students' Wednesday schedules and learn what it's like to walk in the footsteps of their high schooler. On October 8th, Conard students look forward to the college fair, where students can talk to their admissions counselors of around 113 colleges, as well as members of the armed forces to learn more about the options available to them after high school. It will be an exciting night, and hopefully students will start to make and finalize their lists. In addition, admissions officers from different universities have started visiting Conard. Many seniors like myself have taken advantage of this opportunity and will start or continue attending these visits. We're excited for UConn's visit on Thursday, and over 60 of Conard's students are already signed up. Don't forget to save the date for Financial Aid Night. This event is open to all Conard seniors and will take place on Monday, September 30th. We're excited to welcome Robin Ewig, Senior Assistant Director of Financial Aid, as our presenter. Parents and caregivers will receive a school messenger reminder from the school counseling department to ensure no one misses out. Fall sports are also underway. We have over 450 athletes participating just this fall. The start of the season has been thrilling with some tied games and close victories. A special highlight would be our girls swimming team, which remains undefeated going into their third week. The College Board's National Recognition Program acknowledges high-achieving students nationwide across all backgrounds, and we are pleased to say that Conard students have been recognized. Awards categories include First Generation Award, the School Recognition Award, and Rural Small Town Recognition. In the 2025 awards program, Conard has First Generation Award recipients and 82 school recognition recipients. Students will be recognized for this honor at a later date. Congratulations to all. On November 16th, we're preparing for our second annual Crosstown Showcase at St. James Episcopal, featuring Conard Solo Choir, Hall, and Conard Solisti and Hall Choraliers. Shows will be at 3 p.m. and 7 p.m., and both events are ticketed, so be sure to buy your tickets as soon as the info comes out. Conard has also recently announced the upcoming fall play, Good Kids by Naomi Izuka. Congratulations to all new and returning cast members who received a part. I, for one, is one of the many excited to see our award-winning Black Box back in action. Conard Student Council will also be attending the President's Symposium on September 25th. They will set the agenda for the Connecticut Student Council Association and attend leadership workshops. While the votes have yet to been cast for our Student Council class representatives, our President and Vice President have been decided. Congrats to Senior Neela Feeney, Student Body President, and Junior Sofia Vasquez, Student Body Vice President. We can't wait to hear from more of them soon. And finally, in light of Suicide Awareness Month, the students and staff at Conard are deeply grateful to the Student Counseling Department and Pupil Services Department, especially our dedicated school counselors and clinicians whose care and support make a tremendous difference in the lives of our students. Thank you for listening to Conard's updates.
Well, thank you for sharing, Bridget. And Kayla, wonderful job, and you represent your schools quite well. Thank you so very much. Now moving on to unfinished business, where we have a motion by Lorna Thomas-Farquharson, Jason Gagnon, and Gayle Harris to accept and approve revised and new policies as a second reading. Seeking a motion, that the Board of Education accept and approve as a second and final reading the following revised and new policies, which were reviewed by the Board Policy Subcommittee. Referring to Policy 5550, Revised Connecticut School Climate Policy, and 5560, New Restorative Practices Response Policy. So with respect to Policy 5550, Connecticut School Climate Policy, is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Shannon. Latoya, thank you as well. Thank you. And we'll begin discussion with Policy 5550, please.
Thank you. So tonight is, as you mentioned, the second reading for Policy 5550. As a reminder, the Connecticut School Climate Policy is designed to ensure every school fosters a safe, inclusive, and supportive environment where strong relationships are at the center of learning. It's a core belief that has always guided our district's work and will continue to do so. While these requirements come from the state, they align closely with our philosophy, emphasizing that accountability must go hand in hand with opportunities for students to repair harm, learn from mistakes, and successfully navigate their return back to the school community. So really, I guess since we're going to split them both, that's what I have for 5550.
Thank you very much. So again, teammates, this comes before us as a second reading, and we had discussion initially, and this is also an opportunity for discussion before we proceed to vote. Any comments or thoughts or questions regarding Policy 5550? Shannon?
Just more of a procedural question. For the reporting form, is there an opportunity for someone to submit that anonymously? Or would that not be the protocol?
That would not be the protocol because you would have to respond back to that individual. That's part of the process. So theoretically, I guess, if someone submitted it anonymously, there wouldn't be anyone to return that for. That being said, and I know we'll talk a little bit more later tonight about it with our anonymous alert system, and that would probably be the venue if that was something that an individual felt more comfortable reporting it that way.
Jason.
And just because we'll be voting on this tonight, I just wanted to kind of reiterate that 5550 is a bit of an odd duck in that, again, it's mandated by the legislature, but not only is it mandated to have a school climate policy, but the exact wording of this, unlike 5560, the exact wording of 5550 is mandated by the state.
Correct, which you'll see as you look across the districts, you'll see the same exact language in there.
Claire.
So I know the policy can't be changed, but the reporting forms, do you foresee the district looking at the reporting forms and doing anything that might cater more to our district? Those do not have to be taken as is.
So we looked at that in consultation with Shipman. They really had suggested that we stick with the current forms that the state has pushed out. It could be something that as we move forward, we would want to look at, but right now we felt with the first year of implementation to ensure its fidelity, that we would maintain the exact forms as well as the school improvement plan. We'll model the template that the state has pushed out to us.
Ethan.
So I appreciate the summary and understand this is mandated by the state, but I'm still struggling. What are the differences, what's leaving and what's coming, I guess is what I'm trying to, or is there that kind of summary somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I can sort of go over the summary from last time. I mean, there's a couple, I would say, big pieces that are coming in. One would be the adoption of this policy in general. But within that, there's some clear expectations on the tiered intervention approach on how you would handle challenging behavior, and that's specifically spelled out within there. There's also now the designation of a school climate coordinator for the district, as well as one for each school.
So those are all new.
Those are all new, correct. And again, we've already had, I think I mentioned this before, we've already had pretty extensive trainings. I actually did another one today with our assistant principals, and we've done multiple trainings. That we did one last week with our principals to continue to calibrate, because they are the school climate specialists. There's also the surveys, which we've always done, so this will be a part of those pieces. And then ultimately, we talked about crafting that school improvement plan, and so once those are created, there is now a school climate committee that would look at that plan and ultimately accept it, and we would submit that. And that is all essentially new.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to piggyback I think the acceptance or the submission of the school climate plan, that's a new policy and procedural state requirement. We've always had school strategic plans where often principals would be including goals and action steps related to school climate, but we never had a reporting requirement to the state. So that's something that didn't live in your policy before. It was part of our practice. Now it is a requirement for all districts.
Okay. So just to follow up on that, is there a cost in doing this, whether manpower or in taking from other positions, or just supplies or whatever expenses that come with that?
I mean, I think when you look at, with our training and with implementing it, I mean, that certainly takes time. I will say, as we've gone through various, I mean, we've probably done, 30 scenarios at this point with people. When you look through it, how things would be handled, nothing's really changing. It's just the way we have to report it and the way we have to track some of it. So, I think from a cost perspective, it's probably more a time cost perspective than anything else.
But it's not definable until you...
Yes.
Okay. And so it hasn't been put in practice, so we don't know the benefits or is there an anticipated benefit, like this definable?
Well,
I'll jump in. I think, for us, I think it's a codification of practice that we've generally had. I mean, when you look at the parts and pieces, Julio mentioned, a new requirement to define a school-based climate specialist that we've named as the principal of the school. So no cost associated with that. Principal was always, ultimately responsible for behavioral things that occur within the school. They utilize and designate their assistant principals. But in terms of where the benefit comes in, I think the reason that the state came to this, as far as I understand, is really to ensure best practices are occurring consistently across all districts. So whereas in the past, you had a state mandate relative to, I think if you review the old policy that's all lined out, there's a lot of stuff in there with regard to how you approach bullying complaints from the public and the expectations that would happen. The state really looked to expand upon that and set a clear-cut expectation for all districts. As Julio mentioned, he, in partnership with Teresa, they've been leading a lot of scenario-based training with our administrators. We've had two separate large group meetings, and then I know they've had a number of smaller meetings with the assistant principals. And, for us, it's just looking at the practices that we've consistently, routinely kind of followed and applying them to this, to the new language that's in the statute and to any reporting requirements that might be new based on one situation, might not be new in a different situation. So, I think, what will it mean for us? I think for us, it will really assure that we have a better system of checks and balances to make sure that, I'm never going to pretend that our scorecard is perfect, that there aren't situations that can come up within a year where we could have been better. Now it's a little bit of a safeguard to try to really minimize any misses because there's a very clear kind of regimented expectation to follow.
Okay. So my last question is, how do you define success or failure on this?
In my mind, a big part of this and the metrics that the state is looking for, which will be included in a plan, is the measurement on your school climate. So we've had those measurements through through the surveys that we've given in the past. Now it's sort of like taking that measurement and reporting it to the state. So, and there'll be probably more targeted questions that are very specific to the plan. We'll be very intentional with how we're measuring school climate as it relates to the school climate plans that we need to submit. And it'll be the opportunity to measure the impact and success of our efforts
there are
through those
targets.
ways.
There are targets you want to hit.
Yes. So, and I'm sure you'll see, we have until December, late December, to develop a plan and submit to the state. So we'll be able to review some of that with you at a later date.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Claire?
So two big changes that I do see is the definition of bullying and the challenging behavior. And I'm just asking on behalf of the community, those definitions changing can make a big difference. Bullying was a term that was used whenever anybody was mean to somebody. And then you had to do it multiple times. Repeated acts were what bullying used to be considered. And now bullying is broader. And there's a whole lot of different things spelled out about it, as well as the challenging behavior is a new phrase that most of the families aren't as familiar with. So I'm just, whether it's in the handbook or however we're going to pass it on to the public, I think it's really important that the changes in bullying and challenging behavior are defined or explained.
Yeah, and so as we move forward on the agenda, you'll see that that's one of the key components of 5560 is where they really outline the definitions. And just for your FYI, once this is officially adopted by the board, I will go and I'll have some statement that'll go out through the principals to all of the various stakeholders that they can sort of know what's going on and to know that this went through. And that was also part of the legislation. That is a requirement that we message that out for folks. Because, yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Claire, because I think, the definition of bullying has changed significantly, and so we just want people to know that as well.
And I just want to piggyback one fast thing. This term challenging behavior it's a catch-all for any behavior that would sort of give you some attention of the administration. Fits in this universe of challenging behavior, and it's just the phrase that the state has chosen to kind of address any behavior for which there might be, the need for some interventions, for which bullying is a small subset. And to your point, the definition of bullying did change more or less to remove that frequency requirement.
Gayle?
Yeah, I just have one question, really more procedural. If this is a policy that is being mandated by the state, that we have absolutely no ability to change in any way, why are we actually voting on it? I mean, what does it matter if we vote on it?
I'll take that one. I mean, that's really a function of your bylaws. The schools, my responsibility as your superintendent, and obviously to protect the board, to protect our students, we have to follow the law first and foremost. The expectation is that this would become a board policy. That's a mandate from the state that boards of education pass the policy. There are lots of legislative requirements that must make their way into board policy. Many of them don't really have a lot of wiggle room. Some of them do, where typically it's additive. You can add a constraint potentially. This one I think is kind of unique. Why you need to pass it? It's a bylaw piece for you. You are the legislative arm who sets policy, and it's just like sometimes you're told what you need to set.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I just, when we vote on something, it implies that we could actually vote against it. And in this situation, I mean, this is, like you say, it's a pretty unusual situation where it's like mandated, but then we're being asked to vote on it. So it just a little
Understood. Now, thank you. Now I better understand your question. You know, one of the things that was brought up several years back, and I'll share it just to be a topic for reflection or consideration. There have been times when, you know, you could consider as a board, if there are legislative mandates, to just sort of pass those, you know, but typically the board has felt like, well, we want to have an understanding of them. We want to have the ability to talk about them in public. So the vote maybe is more pro forma. But there are different approaches that different boards use. And so it's a matter of, you know, I think there is benefit to the public discussion so that they can see, hear, understand it. At the same time, to your point, you know, you can look at how you choose to pass these things, but it would start to get complicated. You need bylaw revisions. Right now in your bylaws, everything has to go to a second reading and a vote.
Claire.
Yeah, I'm just curious for the training. It just seems out of sync because it says for the school year commencing July 1st, 2024, in each school year thereafter. So we're talking, you know, a year and a half.
Yeah, so it was, they essentially had offered the 24-25 as a year for piloting and implementing if districts wanted to, the 25-26 as a requirement. And so although we didn't put this into board policy last year, Teresa was doing a tremendous amount of work already sort of with setting us up for success for this year. And so that's why at this point, though, every district must have that in place. There were some districts that decided to do it a year in advance, but we felt it would be better to sort of go through the pilot stage and then now be here at this point.
But if this is mandated and you can't change the wording from the state, basically it came out in July of 2024 and we were given some time to put it in our policy?
That is correct. Yeah, that is my understanding. Yeah. So again, it was, we could have put it in place the 2024-25 school year, or we could have put it in place to start this school year. And so that's where we are now.
Other questions or comments? Ethan.
Just to follow up, since this is mandated, we can't make it 25 since that's when you're starting?
So I think the line, it's important to look at the line because I was, you know, I'm looking at the whole thing and, you know, everything that I'm aware that July 1st, 2025, this school year was the mandated start date for this. The line that Claire is referring to is on page 14 where it's talking specifically about training and it's basically saying, hey, schools, beginning last school year, you need to start training on this. We did start training on this during that school year, and it also indicates that, you know, I think the state started talking to us about it at the time. We've been talking about restorative practices, obviously, for several years, as we have social emotional learning, and the school climate culture evidence and research-based interventions have been pieces that we certainly have had, but we've been having more deliberate conversations in anticipation of the passage of this. We were waiting before we made it an official policy because there was some question as to whether or not the legislature might make minor adjustments to it. So before we brought it in front of you, that was the conversations that we were having internally last year.
That's good. I thought I'd seen 25, but I figured I screwed up.
Yeah, everywhere else you look, when you look
Yes,
at
yeah.
like school climate survey or committee or everything else, everything is 2025. It was really just that training component.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Other question? Bridget, yeah.
Sorry. Since it's the school year commencing July 1st, 2025, it's technically already in place. Yeah, okay. I just wanted to make sure that that's what I was.
Yeah, we already operationalizing this, and it was a big component of our back to school professional learning with our administrators.
So right now we're just going through it and making sure everyone understands it.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions or comments? All right. With the motion on the floor pertaining to policy 5550, all of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any oppose? Any abstain? The ayes have it. Thank you. Now seeking a motion that the Board of Education accept and approve as a second and final reading the following revised and new policies which were reviewed by the Board Policy Subcommittee, referring to policy 5560, new Restorative Practices Response Policy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
A second?
Thank you, Gayle, and Claire as well. Thank you. Discussion. And so passing it to you for a moment as well.
Sure. So 5560 really is taking a look at strategies to improve school climate. It outlines the definitions as Claire. Sorry, Claire. Every time I look over at you, I see the name that says Jason, and so it's so Claire had pointed out the definitions are highlighted there. I did want to just also note that if you would look at page 23 in your board packet, based on the feedback from the policy subcommittee as well as from our board discussions, that you'll see the last sentence in there was added, which essentially aligns with the board's desire to have a report out on the data. I think we went with semi-annually on here. So. Sorry, and the last piece I would say, again, as we mentioned in short, both of these policies are state requirements, and so I would really advise the board and recommend that we pass both of these policies as presented today. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Discussion, questions, comments. Shannon.
So I think this is the additive piece to the policy we just discussed that breathes life into it and change. I think new wisdom has arrived around what we know works best in terms of addressing challenging behavior, and that's why this policy was created at the state level. So I think that we just have an opportunity to do a lot of educating and informing people of what restorative practices even are, and I think that's still really fuzzy and unclear for a lot of people. And I had asked at the first reading about just more specificity around the deadlines for this being codified somewhere. So specifically the second to last paragraph on page 23, that the board directs the administration of the district to develop a continuum of strategies to prevent, identify, and respond to challenging behavior. And then continuing with the last sentence, those strategies will be shared with the school community, including but not limited to through publication in the relevant student handbook. Have those strategies been finalized, and have they been published in the handbook?
Let me take a part of that in terms of a timeline for that. I would be suggesting that we have to have the December timeframe, and again, was it 31st or 1st? 31st. December 31st is our requirement to have our plans uploaded and presented to the state. So I would be suggesting that, we can share that compendium with the board and with the greater public in that way during that time. I would also point out, we, in fact, just, was it Thursday, we had a great meeting where we were looking at the typical responses that we would have and how they fit under an umbrella for what's a safety plan, what's a restorative practice, what's a this, what's a that. So that work is ongoing where we sort of, it's not necessarily that we have to reinvent everything, but I think with what's happening with the state, it's kind of fitting things into the appropriate boxes, aligning them to the updated language that exists here within the legislation, and then ensuring that those practices are then more consistent across the district. And I'll let Mr. Duarte handle the part about, I apologize, I don't have the down and in details on the student handbooks, but certainly as we go through this, we recognize there's a need to, provide continuous communication with all the different stakeholders about it. a big piece of that will occur if you go back and review in the first policy. There are these committees that the principals have to assemble, and they include, as you'll recall from last month's discussion, they include parent groups and student representatives. So, that's certainly going to be a means by which to gain input from those stakeholder groups. And then following that, as we do things, there'll be presentations that happen with students in the school. But I don't know if I missed a part of that you want to hit.
No, I would just say, one of the things that's actually been really exciting about this work has been getting our leaders in the room together. And we have so many great leaders that, I like to refer to it as like your toolbox, right? And everyone brings their own tools. And so what we're creating is sort of a document and having people say like, hey, tell us like things, strategies you use, tell us some of the different interventions that you use, and really logging that all in so that when administrators run into some of these challenging behaviors, they can go on there and sort of think and not have to just think outside, their own sort of piece all the time. They can look and see what are some of the things my colleagues have done, what are some of the different things that have worked, and I'll just piggyback on like Teresa's done a lot of work with different subgroups, different groups, just to look at like, hey, here's some different ways to continue to think about that. But there is a piece, as Paul mentioned, just really continuing to educate on that restorative practices component and really looking at what's that goal of that. As far as the language that went into the student handbooks, it was a little bit more generic because we wanted to ensure that the policy went through, and I didn't want to get ahead of the board and put anything out there, but certainly it's something that we've looked at, and it's why we encouraged our schools to really do more of an electronic handbook so that now when policy is put in place, we can modify, and it's easy to do that since it's all online.
So is it possible it would be a different set of strategies in each school's respective handbooks, or you're trying to universalize it?
Yeah,
across
so we
the
have a
district?
universal statement that goes in, like our elementaries may look different and our from our middle school and from the high school piece, but the language is pretty consistent.
Yeah, I guess I just feel more confident in having a date certain by when the strategies would be like clear, like so we could see them, because I don't think we've seen anything that's specific and written down of what that even looks like in practice, because I think we can be advocates for explaining what this is when people scratch their heads and try to understand it. So having that language by a certain date and then knowing it will be published for the broader community by a certain date just gives this more teeth. And so I would like to propose an amendment to add dates, like if December 31st is the date by when the strategies would be created by the administration and then published by August 2026 for the handbook.
I would just, if I may, I would recommend, because this is a policy that's going to live past this year.
Yeah.
And the date that you're looking for is a this year date. So I would just recommend, we ask for that as an agenda item. I'm looking at our calendar, we've got December 16th as a regular meeting, and just establish that locally. Because to put it, in my opinion, to put that in as a date, it's similar to what the state did. Hey, this training's available beginning in 2024, but 3 years from now, we're not going to really care when the training necessarily started. Likewise here, I think I would just recommend, hey, assign us when you'd like us to report to you, and we'll report to you.
Jason.
So if we did December 16th, would that still be a draft policy that we would have a chance to review before it gets sent to the state? Because this is really, this is where the rubber meets the road on all of this, is going to be that policy and how it gets implemented.
So you have to remember, the policy is at a high level. Like, for instance, you guys are not setting policy for what the restorative practice and/or consequence needs to be if a student is targeted to class 3 times. That is not the granular level that you're at. So that's a procedure. The procedures would be something that would still be in draft form on December the 16th prior to our submitting it to the state, and would have the ability, if there was input feedback that you wanted to give, but it's, that's the difference between a policy and a procedure. The policy is that the school needs to be utilizing restorative practices in response to challenging behavior, which when we look at it, we can codify exactly, and we can look at our consistency, but that's not necessarily a new concept for us. I wouldn't say that we're expert, best at it in the world, but I would say that we're well past first base. And so I think that's just a question of the opportunity by which you'd like to hear more information about how we attack this. To Ethan's point, the the measures of effectiveness that we're finding, and any then further discussion that you'd like us to have in an open forum about it.
Yeah, I think there's a real, and I understand the distinction between what our role is and what, the nitty gritty of actually forming a policy, but I think there's a benefit to us having it in front of us and in a public forum to be able to take a look at it, to discuss it while it's still in a draft form, because I think there's something that, we could all probably add to it just in terms of a larger conversation.
Yes, so that, absolutely, that could be, I'll just go back, that could be put in front of you in December. It's just what's put in front of you would be our draft school climate plan. It's not, the plan itself is not policy. The plan is in response to your policy. But we can easily put that in front of you. I mean, that would be my intent regardless.
Just pulling up the bylaws, so the board sets policy, the administration develops regulations to carry out said policies. The board may review regulations at its discretion. So I think these are regulations we would specifically want to review because it's just a new topic. I think we all just want to understand it and have the open conversation about it. And it's an educational opportunity.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement on that. And I'm suggesting December would be relative to the question about timeline.
Claire, Latoya, and then Claire.
Sorry, my throat was a little sore today, but I wanted to move to a different part of the policy, if that's okay? Or are we still?
If I may, Claire, was your piece of this paragraph we're currently on? Okay, yes, please.
So one of the benefits, I think, for the public is the reporting out, if it is in December, I think anecdotal stories and somehow explaining how some things were implemented is very beneficial for the public to understand, because a lot of this is new. So it's great to know the plan, but it's nice to know in a report out some of the successes, some of the different approaches that have been used for discipline.
Yeah, and I'll just say also, when you take a look at the definition right on page 22 of the School Climate Improvement Plan, that's essentially what each school will be submitting. So folks will be able to see that for their own specific school and get a sense of what is it that committee's identified, what they're looking and how they're going to target those different pieces. And they're not all connected to behaviors, right? There's a lot that goes into school climate. So I know that we're sort of looking at it and maybe thinking of it that piece, but there's so much that goes into school climate and the work that we do every day. And so I just don't want us to lose sight of that it's all about the behaviors, because there's a lot that goes into that. And, I think to what Ethan's been sort of messaging is that, this is one of those where we do have some data that we can look at and start to think about, okay, how did our stakeholders respond? How did students respond compared to caregivers, compared to staff? And start to identify what are some of those things that we want to highlight. And then, to answer your question, I think the reality would be we'd hope when we'd resurvey the next year, we'd see an improvement in that ultimate response. And like I said, they're interesting because I know as a principal, I'd look at things sometimes and the kids would be like, hey, this is so great. And then I'd read the caregiver and they'd be like, this is a disaster here. We got to fix this. And I'm like trying to figure out. And then you realize, oh, they're looking at it from different lenses, right? And or vice versa. So, I think it does allow that, but I think what's exciting is it allows each principal to look at their school individually and to think about, all right, what is it that we want to do for our school? And to think about what are the big pieces and maybe some of them, maybe what is the little thing that we really want to look at improving and then be able to measure out that gain so that we could sit there at the end of the year and say, hey, great work, look at the growth we made, or man, we did all that work and we still didn't see a change. Like, what do we need to do now?
And I just want to piggyback because Julio said it so well. It's a both and. I think we can do that here at the board table in terms of the district look. But at the same time, as Julio just sort of mentioned, there's a requirement in the school climate committees to do that at a school level. And so our principals will be doing that and talking about it at those meetings that they have with their constituents, and they'll give notice to that. So the public can kind of have a crack at it here, kind of the what's the mile high look at this across all of our 16 schools. But then, hey, if I'm really curious about how did that translate this year at my child's school, I can attend that meeting and get that information.
Latoya.
Thank you. And yeah, so I wanted to talk about a different part of the policy, that last paragraph that goes into the data collection piece. I know the district has put some practices in place around restorative justice, and that, you know, before this policy came forward, that we have made some strides. But I do want to point out the fact that in 2022, the Office of the Child Advocate did ding our district for disproportionality specific to students of color and students with disabilities. This policy came forward at the state level to address those disparities. And so I think that we need to do what this policy was intended to do, which is also address those disparities. So my suggestion is, where it says here, the board further directs the superintendent or designee to collect and maintain data regarding types of challenging behavior addressed using the restorative practices response policy, and data concerning the implementation and outcomes of restorative practices in addressing disparities, including but not limited to students of color and students with disabilities. I'm sorry. I would want to add that. So after where it says practices, so concerning the implementation, that part, I'd want to add concerning the implementation and outcomes of restorative practices, and then add in addressing disparities, including but not limited to students of color and students with disabilities.
I'm sorry, LaToya, can you just be more clear where you're wanting to add that in?
Yeah.
From the
She's
last
on page
paragraph?
23, I think, the
Yep.
final paragraph.
The last paragraph, okay. I'll read it from the top too, and I'll do it slow so you can see, and I'll tell you exactly where it comes in. So the board further directs the superintendent or designee to collect and maintain data regarding the types of challenging behavior addressed using the restorative practices response policy and data concerning the implementation, and this is where I would add in, concerning the implementation and outcomes of restorative practices, and then I'd add in addressing disparities, including but not limited to students of color and students with disabilities.
So I have one question and one comment. I think as you see with our presentation tonight, we do on our state assessments, you know, we're always happy to disaggregate data. So I don't know the inclusion of that language, if you have an opinion there, Julio. The bigger question that I have is, I don't know necessarily immediately, and I'd have to think about it for a little, like when you say outcomes of, like, I'm not sure what outcome means, what your intent is. But at the same time, I'm also, you know, we're all making sure we understand the requirement from the state to talk about implementation. We can always look at how data is disaggregated, but just like anything else that you see on the public-facing websites, if the N is small, below a certain level, you often, you know, you have to be cautious with whether or not you can report it, because it can potentially inadvertently identify and be a FERPA violation. But I'm just.
I mean, I get it, but and implementation speaks to how something's done, and outcomes is the result of that, and so that's why.
I know,
yeah.
but what does that
Yeah.
mean?
Well, what it means is that
in
our,
this context.
Right. So in this context, like, these things have to, I think they need to specifically be measured in part of this policy. We did get dinged for this as a town, and our recent data from the State Department of Education, 23-24, we're still in tier 3, still having high disproportionality with students of color. So we still have a problem.
Certainly. So by that example, and because that's helpful, I'm trying to understand what you're asking for. By that example, the outcome, the measure of effectiveness, is therefore translated into the frequency of behaviors and trends over time. I mean, that's fine, because my other concern was like outcome. Like, do you want us to report on absent names? You know,
no, but
Julio got in trouble.
Know.
What was the outcome for Julio? Like that?
No, but we want to know. We want to know how students of color and students with disabilities are being handled compared to the rest of their peers. If there's still a disproportionality, we know that's not the students. We need to know those things. And so I think, you know, it has to be a part of this policy because that's why this policy came forward. I was one of the people at the Capitol helping to bring this legislation forward. And it was students of color's families and families that come from marginalized communities that advocated for this, and these disparities are real. And it just so happens that West Hartford in that same time frame was being dinged for these very things. So I think when we bring this policy forward, because we've made a commitment to the work, we're being leaders in the work, that we can push this policy a little bit further to be in alignment with our equity statement and all of the wonderful work that we're already doing. And I think when we put that language in there, we hold ourselves accountable. The state's already gonna hold us accountable, but we hold ourselves accountable to that and we measure it in a real way so we can really look at our practices, not at the students per se, but at how we are dealing with different students. And so I think that's the purpose of it. It's not a like, we're trying to get you, it's a like, we are leaders and if we can step this up and be an example.
Other thoughts or comments? Excuse me. And before we proceed to other thoughts or comments, so thank you for specifying the language. And so the suggestion is for this language to be added to what is here.
Yeah.
Okay. And if that proceeds in that way, that would mean amending the motion on the floor. But as we're still in discussion, please, other comments or questions?
I was just going to say that I think that, you know, I'm not necessarily in favor of adding that language. However, if we are to further change this policy, I feel that, you know, it has to go back to policy committee. So, because I appreciate LaToya reading it out, but it's too much for me to sort of, without having it written, excuse me, in front of me, I feel like if we're going to be making substantial changes, there has to be 2 readings, and it really should go back to policy committee so the policy committee can look at it before we make amendments to a policy that we don't even have the language in front of us. That's just my feeling if we're going to go by the laws of what we usually do here.
Ethan.
I had 3 comments or 3 questions. It's killing me. 3 comments or questions. You mentioned the toolbox, which is there like, I realize it comes up at the meetings, but is there like a collection or being like as a reference that administrators can look at for each of the schools? Because I'm certain they're not at all the meetings.
Yeah, so that's been, I mean, everyone's got what they've got already, and what we've been doing is really trying to create one central document where people can put all their things there and hopefully make things a little bit easier too for people and also allow for us to learn from each other.
That's great. That's what I was going to suggest. On page 22, it talks about the school resource officer not being part of the solution or the process.
So that's not part of a restorative practice. So our school resource officers are, you know, obviously they're phenomenal partners for us. They're obviously involved anytime there's a need in terms of a law, something like that. But I believe this policy kind of specifies, just given their role as a law enforcement professional, if you're doing a conference with children following an incident and you're trying to restore and repair, they don't want, in the same way, you know, that we send our educators to training for that. And not necessarily have to make it like the principal that's going to be there in a position of authority where all of a sudden you feel not that the principal or the SRO or anybody else would be intending for their authority to feel a certain way, but if I'm there, it could have a different feel. So typically we have our trained staff that might be doing something, and I think that's the intent of this legislation. That said, I just have to take a plug, and you're going to hear them come up. Our school resource officers are an amazing asset. They build incredible relationships with our students, and so that's a piece to this legislation. I think I understand its intent, but I want to make sure it's not misunderstood by the public or anyone here, of course.
So I assume that this is a mandatory in the document.
This is another piece that was provided to us from the legislature.
Yeah, I understand. It just seems to me you're isolating them and you're sort of saying they're not the legislature is saying they're not wanted. I have a problem with that, but that's fine, it's what's in the document.
I would agree that the optics of it aren't necessarily the best, but at the same time, where we've had restorative conferences, typically we're doing that in-house anyway, so I don't know that it's necessarily a big shift.
All right, let me redefine it. So it's like an absolute. So to me, I understand certain situations, it's not applicable. Certain situations you can do better without, but it just seems to make it an absolute. I had a problem with it. And then the final thing is, and LaToya's suggestion or comment, if we could see statistics, and I realize we don't have the statistics, it would be very helpful, because I'm not sure. I like to see the numbers.
Yeah, this clearly defines a reporting requirement, and I think the points that are made are well taken. I don't know the specifics. I'm not prepared to give anybody legal counsel on what it means to change any of this, but so I think that's a separate question for you guys to continue to debate. But at the end of the day, our intent would be to be as transparent as we can be without violating FERPA with the board, with the public, with everybody. So, I'm not opposed to the question. I just don't know the finer points of the legalities and what we'll be able to produce at any point in time. We will make sure that we can provide as much information to the board as possible without violating the privacy of any one student.
So if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, but if we do look at it, I'd like to see the statistics. That was just for future. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Jason?
So I really appreciate LaToya's comments on this, and I see exactly what she's trying to do and align this with essentially our core mission. And I think it recognizes, that we've come a long way in this district. We really have, and I think we should be grateful for all the work that everyone has done. That doesn't mean we can't get better. It doesn't mean, that reaffirming where we want to be is a bad thing. But I think Gayle's point's also right, that if we're going to do this, if we're going to amend it in this way, I think, one, to Paul's point, we need to know what we can do within the bounds of kind of legal counsel on this, because I think there was a question as to how much we could edit this. And then two, I think it's only fair to have the exact language in front of us that we're voting on. So I would not be opposed to sending this back to policy to get that language right. If we're going to do it, we should do it right.
Claire?
So in reading the whole paragraph, it's hard to understand, but if I understand correctly, you're adding the word outcomes after implementation, you're adding the word outcomes after implementation. And outcomes, okay. And then after restorative practice, you want to say including but not limited to persons of color and individuals with disabilities.
Yes.
And so that part at the end is basically tying it back to our equity focus, our commitment to these areas. I mean, we're strong in many areas, but we had a problem there. And this is a problem nationwide. It's a problem everywhere, that the prevalence of people with disabilities and people of color are often finding themselves in difficult situations more often, and that those statistics are things that the Office of the Child Advocate monitor, let schools know, and say, you've got to relook at these numbers. So I appreciate what you're adding. If it has to go back to policy, I would hope it would come for a reading at the next meeting, and then we can vote.
So, were you going to say something? Okay. Oh, Gayle, please.
Yes, I just want to say, if it were to come to the next meeting, I think we would have to we don't have a policy committee before the next meeting.
We have, yeah, I sent the agenda out for our Thursday meeting, so I would have to look at adding this to that agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought the next policy committee was in October.
September 18th, I believe, correct?
Oh, okay, I apologize.
It's fine. One of the things I'll just throw out there too, I don't know the board's comfort on this, but is approving as is and then bringing it back to the subcommittee for revision. Because if we do, if it sounds like the next reading would be a first reading, and then we'd have another reading, we probably wouldn't be able to get this in our books for maybe another month. And I don't know if that will start to create some issues with the delay and having this as a Board of Ed policy. I just want to throw that out there.
So, Claire.
But could we make this a first reading right now if we read it? There's been a first reading. Now, this was a second reading with a revision. The second reading of this revision would be next time we meet.
So if I may, so first of all, thank you all for your suggestions, your inputs. Thank you for the suggested language. That is the purpose for this board. Again, our primary purpose is to issue policy, and it's important that we understand what said policy is. And so with this specific policy, 5560, coming before us as a second reading, that presumes that the first reading was successful. The second reading is approving it as is. However, we have some suggested edits to it. And so for that purpose, I think we have a two-pronged approach to take. One, which includes what you mentioned, but I'll start with the former. That being for an amendment to be suggested to add said language. So we would have to make an amendment to add said language. First, someone makes the motion, someone seconds, we discussion, and then we vote on if we want to add that language. If that vote does reach majority vote, then it is now part of the language, and it kind of starts the clock again, if I'm not mistaken, as this being a first reading. What we're having now is a discussion of the first reading. To your point, Gayle and Jason, it would then go before the policy subcommittee again to review, and it would come before the board again for a second reading. So I think this goes to your point of the timeliness of when that could come before the board again for a second reading. And also want to be clear, the reason why we have the policy of a first reading and a second reading is not only for the board to discuss and be aware of, but for the public as well to be discussed, to be aware of, and we have public comment. So if there are public comments to make in regard to what policies are under review, those opportunities are afforded to them. And so that is one place we can go. Another one is what was suggested, is to pass the policy as is. However, recognize that we will review it in the policy subcommittee for revision, and then it will come before the board again to revise. But at least at that point in time, the policy is already in place, it's in practice, which again, legally, it is has already occurred. I see your hand, Jason, yes.
Just timing-wise, I actually think I'm leaning towards the latter, just because the other thing to consider is we will soon be sitting a new board, which will complicate things if they come in and they're getting a first reading and then want to amend from there. So I think it makes a lot of sense if we pass the policy tonight as written, and then we can send it back to, to do a revision in the new policy committee, whoever that's made up of, and really get it right.
Gayle.
Right, and I want to, I appreciate, Lorna, the two suggestions that you're making. I want to echo Jason's thoughts over there that if there seems to be a need to pass this, quickly, I would also recommend that we consider passing it the way it is tonight. And then we have, as Jason's stating, there'll be some new members on the policy committee shortly, and they could potentially take this up and revise it as needed. But I think it's very hard to, at least for me, to pass something that I don't see in writing, and I need to have it in front of me. So I would be in favor also of the second option.
Claire.
So the policy meeting's Thursday. That gives time to look at it. October meeting could be a first reading, and November 4th or 5th could be the second reading. That way it is passed with this board. It's not brought into a new board. We have enough time to do a October first reading and vote on it. It gives the public enough time, and on November 4th, we can have our second reading.
Ethan, and then LaToya.
Two things. One is, I think there's still the question of, can we change it? I thought that was the question. We can change it?
This one we can.
I think that if you're bringing this back to policy
No, no,
subcommittee,
I thought the state,
Oh, that was the first one.
I don't
they were
understand.
both that way.
No, not this one.
Okay, then fine. What I would like to see is statistics. We're assuming they're there, they're probably there, but I'd like to see statistics.
LaToya.
Yeah, I agree with Claire. I think we can get this passed. I think we have the time to do it. I think it's a high priority. I think it also sends a message to the very communities that were addressed in that concerning article, and that continue to be addressed regarding the disproportionality, that we are taking this seriously. In terms of statistics, you can look up data at the State Department of Education, and you can also Google the Office of the Child Advocate article, West Hartford Public Schools, and just type in disparity, and you'll find it. But also, again, with the State Department of Education, if you look at the data around discipline, they have it broken down in tiers. They have districts broken down in tiers: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4, and it tells you what each of those mean. And we are in tier 3, which says we still have a high disproportionality around discipline with students of color. And so it is out there for the public, just to put that out there. So I do think we can get this done. And again, I think it's critical that we do it for these communities and show them that we're serious, and that there's a sense of urgency around how we're caring for their kids and these community members. That's belonging. That's a big part of belonging. We're taking this serious. We're putting it in our policy. We're going to make sure we pass it ASAP, because that's how much we care about you. And so I want to leave us with that.
Jason.
So it sounds like some of the first proposal for Plan 1 would depend on if we can even get it on the agenda for the upcoming policy committee meeting. Do we have time to do that? Can we update the agenda with enough notice?
If I may. Let me lead with, because this is important for me. I don't have any opposition whatsoever. Very excited to ensure that whatever we're doing in terms of how we're reporting to the board, how we're reporting to our public, is as transparent as we can be, and in support of improving any disproportionality that might remain. And I know there's there's stuff that remains. So I just want to lead with that. The question that's being asked is, how do we get there? What's the process? That's important, because I would agree with many things. There is a potential, there is enough time, theoretically, for this board and this existing policy subcommittee to have to have a meeting and get 2 readings in before the change in the board, which will occur November 18th. That's theoretically possible, assuming that conversations at policy subcommittee are, go, and there's enough agreement and all the rest. And that's also assuming, the input, which is, I think, why it's important to bring it to your policy subcommittee to get, to get the legal advice on anything that we're doing. Because once it's policy, it's a tighter bond versus what you can also accomplish just by, saying, I'd like to see this specifically. We can get there multiple ways, but I think it's a public statement when you set it to policy. So I understand the intent, and I'm short of the legalese and all the rest, not opposed to that in the least. So I think what needs to be decided right now, because I do think that there is a potential. First, the board subcommittee needs to agree to what that language is going to be. Secondly, the whole purpose of a first and second reading is that you have a legal responsibility under FOIA that whatever it is that you're voting on has been shared publicly, is up on our website, has been put up on, is available at that table. So you don't really have a means to make a big substantive change. If it was the inclusion of one word or something like that, that would be small. And that doesn't sound like a lot, in terms of the language you're trying to add. I appreciate that, but I think there's some legal pieces that you want to make sure that we have right. So you would need a first and a second. We have the time to do that. It's a question of, to me, the only question is, how do you want to proceed from here? And I think you have two choices. You could operate from passing this and then putting revision on and fast tracking a revision. That would, and I'll tell you my humble opinion on pros and cons of both approaches. Or you could table this, which essentially means it doesn't get a vote at all, and then you bring it forward as a new proposal from a first reading. It sounds to me as if you're going to bring it forward as a new proposal from a first reading regardless, so it's just a question of how do you want to get there. The one pro to passing a policy this evening is it gives you a little bit more cover that should something happen between now and the eventuality of when something gets passed, and there needed to be an investigation and all the rest, an investigator comes and says, what's the board policy on this? And if you don't have a policy, it's, hey, we can all go to the tape, we can all see it. It's not going to necessarily be the end of the world because I think we've got a good record of what's happening, but it gives you a little bit more cover. Otherwise, you could just say, nope, not comfortable with that. It's more important to me to have a public statement that we get it out there right the first time than you table it. To me, that's the debate you want to have. Is this a table or is this a passage with a subsequent requirement of a revision? To me, those are your questions to debate and decide.
All right, teammates, lots to process, discuss, digest, but we will have to determine a path forward. Other questions or suggestions or thoughts regarding where we are at this point in time? Claire.
So within the policy meeting, there's limited board members, and not everyone can speak. Non-policy board members are not allowed to speak, so there wouldn't be a discussion at the policy meeting. I agree that it might need to be drafted and seen in written form at a policy meeting, and I would love to have legal advice on the wording. But I'm not comfortable with a few representatives of the board on the policy committee being the sole authors of what comes forward later.
Jason.
I don't think that's how that process would work. So for instance, I would ask LaToya to get a red line version of exactly what she's thinking over to Julio so we could have that for the agenda. That's as a starting point. Then we can discuss that. Ethan, you can do the same thing if you have language that you'd like to propose. So then we have the text from the two folks who've actually recommended amendments being made. Those would be on the table at the policy committee meeting. We certainly, among the three of us, would debate that with our own ideas, and then it would come, as it should, to the first reading where the entire board gets to look at it. I mean, that's the process for everything that we do.
Other thoughts, comments? Shannon.
So, I think it feels like we're probably overcomplicating some of this, but I do agree that I was very interested in adding outcomes to the mix because I feel like you can implement, but if you don't get the result you're looking for, so what? Like, I couldn't, having worked at the state level on a lot of policy, we implemented a lot of things that did not get the intended result that we wanted to see. So to Ethan's point about what does success look like, that's the outcomes piece that I think is really critical. And then the part that LaToya I see as modifying is we were going to get disaggregated data anyway. She's just putting a finer point on the disaggregated data that we'd be looking at maybe a little more closely would be with discipline data relative to students of color and students with disabilities, which is why this became into being in the first place as a policy at the state level. So I'm very supportive of the change, would like to follow the proper process. So if we need to pass something to be on the record with the formal policy, I appreciate that, but I would want to insist on fast tracking the change, adopt this tonight if we can, and then get the change in motion for the Thursday meeting so we could make that change really quickly and make sure this is reflective of what seems to be something pretty straightforward in relative to tightening it for what I think we want to represent as West Hartford.
So from what I'm hearing, thank you, I'm hearing a both and there. Yeah. A both and being to vote on said policy as is, 5560, to vote on it as is. However, to impress upon us to have this as an agenda in our upcoming policy subcommittee meeting to discuss the revisions as suggested by fellow teammate LaToya, and for that to be something to expedite coming before us again as a revised element to then apply. Okay. LaToya.
Okay, just for clarity, it would go on the agenda, and the revision would come before this board, and we would have an opportunity to vote on the revision.
Yeah, if I may, if it gets onto the policy subcommittee meeting for the 18th, Julia, you could discuss it as a first reading on October the 21st, and then you could have a vote on it on November the 5th as a second reading.
And so just for clarification purposes, because I want to be transparent too, is that you would just need to get me a red line, first thing, because I would want to make sure that it's up on our website, because we'd have to modify it. The agenda has been posted already and was emailed to our subcommittee members today. So obviously the folks here know it's coming, but I'd want to be able to get that up there for the public to see too. So if you can get that to me, I'm not going to say tonight, but first thing tomorrow morning.
Oh, I can get it to you tonight, Julia.
Yeah, Julia, what time is your meeting?
12 o'clock on Thursday.
So we have
I'm looking at Gayle.
we have a 24-hour requirement. So he needs to have any amendment to the agenda posted before noon tomorrow.
Gayle, your hand was raised before, was it?
Yeah, I just was clarifying so that we're going to vote on this tonight as is, and it will be on the revisions, or the revisions with the red lines will be on the next policy meeting. Okay.
All right. So once again, the motion on the floor pertains to policy 5560. And what we are proceeding to vote on is this motion as is. Again, with the caveat that this will come before the policy subcommittee and will come before the board once again as a first reading for our October meeting. So again, we're voting on said policy as is. Any other discussion before we vote? All right, all of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain?
Opposed.
Oh, let me start once again, pardon me. All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
One opposed. Any abstaining? All right, the ayes have it. Okay, thank you. And so thank you, LaToya. You will share the red line version with Julio, and we'll take it from there. All right, now on to new business, where we have revision of the 2025-2026 Board of Education calendar by adjusting the November 18th, 2025 board meeting start time to 6 o'clock. Seeking a motion that the Board of Education approve the recommendation to adjust the November 18th meeting start time from 7 p.m. to 6 p.m. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Claire. Discussion, Mr. Vicines.
Yes, if I may direct you in your board book to page 25, and I would ask you to look specifically at, that's just your listing for reference. I would ask you to look specifically at November 18th. So November 18th will be the meeting where we traditionally will have the election of new officers. We will have the farewells to departing Board of Education members. We will have the swearing in of new Board of Education members. It also coincides with the same night that the town council does the same thing. And it was just a miss on our part to not have that meeting when we originally published your calendar, not have that meeting start earlier at 6 p.m. because I don't know if it's by bylaw or by statute, the town council has to be done at a very specific time, and they follow us. So we have to kind of get in and get out in order to enable them to be able to do the same thing. And I certainly don't want to shortchange the opportunity for us to celebrate those members who will be coming off, nor welcome those members who will be coming on. So the request would be to just simply start the meeting at 6 p.m.
Thank you. Discussion, comments, questions? Ethan?
What time are we supposed to be done by?
The goal would be for us to be out by 7:30. Traditionally, that's the only item on the agenda, absent anything, super routine that doesn't take more than a couple of minutes.
I'm just curious.
Other questions? Bridget?
Are we permitted or are we supposed to attend this meeting? Yes?
Student representatives will generally attend.
Perfect, thank you.
Other questions, comments, suggestions? All right, with a motion on the floor, all of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? The ayes have it. All right, moving now on to staff communications and reports, where we shall have our superintendent's report. Passing it to you, Mr. Ricey.
Thank you very much. And our two very capable and astute student representatives have taken some of my fire, but I'm excited for that. That's not a problem at all. I'll sort of reiterate the sentiment that school is really in full swing at this point. September, we'll see a number of themed celebrations, not the least of which to include Hispanic and Latino Heritage Month, which just began on the 15th. As you know, we're also in Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month, and heard a nice thank you and shout out to our school counseling department, as well as our clinical staff for all that they do. And I think I also heard mentioned about Hall and Connard's curriculum nights, but across all of our schools, even some, there might have been one late last week, and throughout this week and into next week, we have curriculum nights, fall fairs across all of our elementaries, middle schools, and high schools, opportunity for our parents to meet the teachers and to learn a little bit more about it. I did want to make a reminder out to families while I have the opportunity that our schools are closed on Tuesday, the 23rd of September, in recognition of Rosh Hashanah. I know it was already mentioned. I'll throw the shout out to our Hall seniors, Allison Chen, Sam Lewis, and Ian Wolf, who were those National Merit semifinalists that Kayla mentioned. But I wanted to share a little bit of the story that Bridget shared about the unveiling of the mural over at Connard High School. This is a mural about belonging spaces, and it's something that was co-created by a local artist by the name of Julie Bergeron. We had a huge thanks and shout out to the Rise Up for the Arts, Matt Conway, as well as the Connecticut Center for Nonviolence, Gabe Boyd, who partnered with the students and all the students that were involved. But the inspiration of it was shared by Lindsay Tringali, who's assistant principal over at Connard, and she kind of told the story about a student with permission from a former student who I'll just identify by first name as Agatha, because I think it personalizes it. And Agatha was a new freshman to Connard, had come in tears to the office one day, was having some struggling, and shared with Lindsay that no one cared for her. No one at school had ever cared for her. Lindsay didn't know the child very well, first meeting, beginning of a school year, new assistant principal. But she said to her, Agatha, I care for you. I care about you, and if you give me the chance, I promise you over the course of the next few years, the school will prove that to you. Fast forward 2 years later, she shared with Lindsay that they had already come through on that promise, and that she had found a place for the first time in her life where she felt that she truly belonged. Fast forward 2 years after that, and she was one of the student graduation speakers, where she shared that same story, that same sentiment on stage. And I'm looking for the specific quote that she gave. She shared, "Nothing has ever come easy for me, but there are people who help you feel like life is not so hard after all. I'm glad that I gave those people, those amazing teachers, the opportunity to walk along my path and show me that I belong here." It was such a touching and moving story that I with permission, asked Lindsay if I could share that at tonight's meeting, and I'm just so very, very grateful to those organizations for supporting our kids. I'm grateful to the students and their vulnerability, and I'm grateful to the amazing teachers and administrators that we have across the district who let all of our children know that they belong here. So I wanted to share that with you. Other than that, I don't know if I can come better than that. So you heard about Constitution Day tomorrow. I think the only other thing I want to share is some quick announcements of some things to be on the lookout for. Charter Oak International Academy will be hosting its annual Peace Day celebration on Friday the 19th. An invitation has been sent to board members to your email. The West Hartford Prevention Partnership and Rise Up for the Arts is hosting another community mural dedication. This one will happen at Blueback Square on September the 30th. And there's a shout out to artist Catherine Tolva. And then lastly, on November the 2nd, early notice, and I'll remind you again, our very own Office of Equity Advancement in partnership with the town of West Hartford will be hosting our second annual West Hartford Community Block Party, where we will see schools, local community organization, town leaders engaging with the public to share resources, to build awareness, and really to build connection in community. So we're very excited about that. That event takes place at the town hall from like 11 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. So those are my updates, and I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you
November
so much. Teammates, any questions or comments regarding our superintendent's update? All right, good things happening. Thank you excuse me, thank you very much. Now moving on to staff reports and board discussions, where we shall have our safety and security update. And as teammates come to the table, we'll pass it once again to our superintendent for introductions.
Absolutely. So as Mr. Duarte and the team come forward, and I'll ask Julia to introduce everyone, but we're joined obviously by our great and amazing partners with the West Hartford Police. And so very excited to have this joint presentation. But Julia, I'll let you do the formals and take it from here.
Sure. Good evening. I am pleased to provide an overview of the steps we continue to take to maintain a safe and welcoming environment for our students, caregivers, and staff. I want to start by reinforcing the notion that the safety and well-being of every member of our school community is our highest priority. With that said, we recognize that safety goes well beyond physical measures and relies heavily on the strength of trusting relationships that we work to build every single day with all of our stakeholders. As you can see, I've brought some friends with me today. So Eric Dempsey, our Director of Security, Sergeant Hopkins, who was also back in the day my former SRO over at Conard High School, and last but certainly not least, Assistant Chief Rickabon, here tonight to help present with me. I did want to take a moment to recognize the incredible work that Eric and Joanna Blumetti, who I know is sitting out there in the audience and wanted to sit with us, but we didn't have room for her. And the work that they do every single day. As I've transitioned into this office, I think Eric's probably the first person I talk to every single morning, and perhaps the last person I talk to every single night. And I know Joanna as well. And so they often are the people doing a tremendous amount of work that are behind the scenes. And so I did want to just publicly thank them for all of the hard work that they do to ensure that our schools are safe and great learning environments. I also wanted to take a moment to just thank the amazing partnership we have with the West Hartford PD. Again, that's been something that's been really interesting for me as I transitioned into this role, and to get to know them a little bit more and see them in a different light. And I had the benefit of, like I said, working every day with Sergeant Hopkins, and I'll say the conversations that we had and how much he cared about kids, and really just helping them outside of school and connecting them with partnerships and talking to them about all these other things that weren't related to, I think, sometimes what you might think an SRO is doing, was really just important. And I can't tell you how many kids came to see me and would say the amazing connection they had with him, and certainly with Officer Martin too when she was there. So did want to just highlight that partnership. So I'll start off by highlighting a few items related to our safe school climate. We'll go from there. So one of our important focuses is certainly continues to be the mental health support. I think, it doesn't, sadly perhaps, it doesn't take much for us to just look in the paper and see all the different struggles that folks are having, and we know that that's critical for us to continue to support our students every single day. Our counselors, as I know Bridget mentioned, really, the work they do is phenomenal. And they're meeting with kids, they know their students, they know their families, they know the struggles they're going through. And so I'm always just so impressed with them, as well as the other, clinical staff that we have. And, when I'm in the buildings, I don't know that there's ever a time where I walk into our school clinical office and see them just sitting there alone, right? They're always with students, and if they're not in their offices, they're out in classrooms delivering lessons and really looking at those pieces. And so in addition to that, we've done a lot of training with trauma-informed practices, and we know the impact that trauma has on students and all of those things. So really wanting to make sure that we're doing that across the board, and as well as restorative practices. And I did want to highlight that we continue our partnership with the Bridge, and they continue to provide services to our students alongside with all of our clinicians, and that's been a wonderful partnership. And I believe the Bridge breakfast is this week, tomorrow. In addition, we follow, and I think there was a more extensive presentation in the past, but I did want to just highlight, we continue to follow the comprehensive school threat assessment guidelines. So this is really a proactive, structured, and research-based backed method that helps schools keep students safe, but also it really helps to look at providing supports for our students when they're struggling. And so I think those are one of the things that we always want to make sure is that we're identifying those two different pieces and then making sure that we're providing the support for our students. And whatever is the most appropriate way to do that. I wanted to highlight our partnership with the Sandy Hook Promise. I was able to attend a training last week. I'm excited to attend one next week that we'll be hosting over at Conard High School. And they really have these two programs. One is the Start With Hello, which is really looking at how to promote social inclusion and connection among students and what are the various things. And we talked and shared a lot of different things that schools could be doing that aren't, truthfully, they're not high cost, they're not a lot of work, they're just things that are small and really meaningful in people's lives, right? And really just the work that we want to continue to do in that. And I think Paul was a perfect segue to that whole model that, you never know, right? We say you don't know what someone's going through unless you can stop and listen to them and take the time. And you also don't know the impact your words have. And so those simple like, hey, how's it going? What do you need? In doing some of that. And then also with Say Hello, which really teaches students to emphasize, to seek help, identify problems, and respond ethically and responsibly. And so we continue with the old model of say something, see something. And I know Eric will report on our data with the anonymous alert, but that continues to be I think when you look at all of the various structural, physical things that we put in place to keep buildings and keep students safe, at the end of the day, we know that the most important thing is those relationships and students being able to come up and to say to whether it's the SRO or security guard, a teacher, whoever that trusting adult would be, a parent that can then submit that to us. And again, I think having that model where people can feel safe and do it anonymously if they want to, and be able to do that. And again, Eric will share that is certainly something that continues to be heavily utilized. And then the last piece I'll touch upon is just the powerful social and emotional learning programs that we keep doing and lessons that we keep implementing, which really are targeted lessons. They help students develop emotional regulation, self-management, and conflict resolution. The other day I was in an elementary class, which is always really exciting for me as a secondary person to get in and see, and I watched the teacher hand out cards. They were flipped upside down. The student would take it, and it had a feeling on it, and then the student had to act out that feeling, and then the other students in the class had to pick, like, hey, what are they showing? You're sad, right? And then they talked about, well, what did you see that made you know that's what they were feeling? And really just harping on those things that, hey, we should be looking, we can look at our friends, we can look at people and try to figure out how they're feeling, and then what can we do about that? And so they talked about, hey, if they're feeling sad, what would be some things that you could do, right? And the kids were, hey, I would share my lunch with them and my snack. And although I thought, absolutely, that would make me happier, right? They talked about things that they could do at recess or how to include them, just stuff that was really, really relevant to them. And so, again, those are just some of the amazing things that we continue to do. We spend a lot of time and certainly a lot of messaging up here talking about teaching and learning, which is obviously at the heart of our business. But we all know that if students don't feel safe, that you can't get to that point. And so I've done a lot of work and a lot of research, and I will say that we are really doing some really, really great things. And I will give a lot of that credit to the team and certainly to Eric and some of his innovation. So I will turn it over to him at this point.
Thank you, and good evening. As Julio touched upon, our Anonymous Alerts program, this technology is accessible on both computers and a mobile application, allowing anyone who sees a dangerous situation to alert school staff anonymously. The technology is designed to provide two-way communication, enabling school staff to acknowledge receipt of the message and request more information as needed. At the start of the school year, all school principals make students, staff, and caregivers aware of the tools and educate students about the importance of reporting safety issues. Flyers are posted around the schools to remind students to report situations of concern, and the anonymity of this approach encourages those who feel vulnerable to speak up without fear of reprisal. There's QR codes that are up at all the schools, so kids can scan right on their phone and get linked directly to this Anonymous Alerts reporting system. And the success of this program, I mean, when this program first rolled out, we started in 2018, roughly 70 reports, started growing to about 126 reports. And since roughly 2021, we had 474 reports, and last year, last school year, 24-25, we had 434 documented uses of the Anonymous Alerts reporting system. So it's great that students, staff, and parents, are using this program. I'm happy to report we talked about our Informacast lockdown system. Our IT department's been doing great work over the summer. We have all 16 of our schools. The system has been installed at all the schools right now. They're not all currently online. We're slowly bringing them online because we have to test. So we're doing that in conjunction with our school drills for the start of the school year, which will be starting at the end of this month and October as well. Just to refamiliarize yourself, this initiates a lockdown, activates several other building emergency protocols and procedures such as secure the school and secure the classroom. It's a mass notification system that not only has an audio and visual alert to inform people of an event, the key advantage that it calls 911 directly and goes directly to the West Hartford Police Department. Again, as Julia talked about earlier, we're thankful for our continued partnership with our school resource officers and community resource officers. Their role in the school, they're an integral part of our school community. Our officers are trusted, familiar faces who provide lessons, safety, and support at all levels within the school. At the start of the school year, every year, we've been doing this for years now, we have officers assigned to every one of our schools at the beginning of the school day and at the end of the school day. And without hesitation, just the type of communication we have when the tragedy took place, unfortunately at the beginning of our school year out in Minnesota, by the time I reached out to the police department, they were already assembling the troops to go and, have an officer in every one of our schools all day, just to help reduce that anxiety with students, staff, and parents, just to see, a police officer inside the building, which was phenomenal. We thank them for that work that they did out there. Prior to the start of the school year, the West Hartford Police Community Resource Officers and SROs and our guards conducted a joint training, as we've been doing for several years now, in conjunction also with the West Hartford Fire Department. It was held at the police training room. The multi-agency training consisted of updates to recent active shooter events, including lessons learned from recent incidents. We also received updated medical response training on bleed control, tourniquet application, with the West Hartford Fire Department. That was some great training that we received. We continue to abide by the state mandates for our safety drills each year. Last year, we submitted our drills on time to the state of Connecticut. We work collaboratively with our guards, the West Hartford Police Department, and the West Hartford Fire Department to evaluate each and every drill and provide feedback for improvements. We're currently in the process of finalizing our all-hazard operational plan, another state mandate, which will be submitted prior to November 1st to the Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security as required. This is a collaborative effort working again with the West Hartford Police Department, West Hartford Fire Department, and Emergency Management. This year, our school-based threat assessments are done. That's a physical safety audit of each and every building, and those will be submitted as well with this plan.
Good evening, everybody. No, I just wanted to echo what Julio and Eric already said. I think, agreeing with Julio, I think my first and last phone call is probably to Eric before I leave for the day. But the constant cooperation that we have with them, the constant collaboration, we're always trying to think of different ways to improve. The 5-person team that I have between the 2 SROs and the 3 community resource officers in the 11 elementary schools and 3 middle schools. We're always trying to brainstorm ways to interact with the kids and to, get out into the community, do more community outreach, and that starts within the schools. And so, I thank them all the time, and, thank you guys for having us, obviously, in the schools.
I guess I'll end this. I just want to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Because you do get pushback sometimes with having SROs in the school. We've been in the school since the 70s, but the support that we get from the community, from the board, from the students is very, very vital to us, and it's important to us. The community relations falls on my side of the house. I basically tell them anytime they make a decision, it involves the 3 C's that I say. It has to be community-oriented, and that community is not only the schools, but the police department, the town of West Hartford. Our communication has to be outstanding. Not good, it has to be outstanding. And then the last thing is, let's use common sense. They're kids. They're growing up, and we have to use common sense. And as long as we're using those 3 C's, every time we make a decision from our end, we're gonna make a very good decision. But again, your support, the support of the team members that are up here on the front is absolutely outstanding. And I can speak with that because before I got to this position, I was in the schools for 5 years as officer friendly, and I loved it. And the amount of time and effort that's put in to the safety and care of our students each and every day. And again, each and every day, and the community needs to know that there is some sort of conversation going back and forth between the Board of Education and the police department. It's important. When we had that unfortunate shooting in Minneapolis, we put officers in the schools for 2 days straight, pulling people from divisions, canceling other events because it was important to the community. It's important to those parents and those students to see that they were safe so they could go and learn. So again, appreciate everything that you do and the dialogue we have back and forth. And for the community to know that when their kids go to school, there's a lot of people that put thought into making sure that they're safe. So we appreciate everybody.
Again, I want to just echo that. I think in all that I do, I try and sort of reflect on, I think, Lorna, you say this all the time, the many hats that we all wear, right? And this is one of those avenues, and anytime I'm walking and thinking about these things, I can't help but put my dad hat on, right? And that's something that every day when I watch my kid get on the bus or however that goes, it's just the world we live in, that this is something that unfortunately, I'm thinking about. And so I can tell you that the work that this team does, and I hope and feel that you can feel it from them, that it's not just their job, it's what they believe in. And like I said, I don't know too many places where not only could we call and say, hey, we need some support just to make sure people feel comfortable, and there's no pushback at all. They're like, nope, we're on it, boom, right? Because that then lets kids go to school. It lets our teachers, right, look and say, okay, I feel safe, and so I do want to just thank them. And the last piece I'll leave you with is just that while this report certainly highlights some of the actions that we've taken, there's no report that I could do that would encompass everything that we're doing. And I think that the most important thing is our daily interactions that we have every day that really look at positive relationships, continuing to ask students, hey, do you have one adult in this building that you feel comfortable talking to? Right, and just really making sure that every single student feels that way. And that really has to be the foundation of the work that we do day in, day out. And I'm confident that when we do that, then our teachers can do the great work that they do and teach kids. So thank you.
Thank you. Teammates, questions or comments? Toya, yes.
Just a comment. Just thank you for what you do. Just doing this restorative justice work and talking to a lot of different folks that work in schools and in communities. I get excited and I feel confident about sharing how our district has such positive relationships with our police officers, our school resource officers, and that it's because there's such a priority to have those relationships, and they go beyond the schools. They're embedded in the community too, and so I love to share that. And I don't know. I think I've said it many times up here. Just knowing that y'all get trained in restorative justice, that you're just in the schools building with kids, building with family. I'm like, yeah. I hope maybe West Hartford could be a training ground for SROs, around the state, and kind of show them this is the model. This is how you do it. This is how you're a part of the community. Because you guys are doing such a great job, and thank you.
Jason.
Yeah, really, I'll just echo that, and just from a father's perspective, I mean, it's the sad state of the world that we live in, that when you drop your kids off at school, you're not just dropping them off at school, right? You hug them a little tighter. You always have that thought in the back of your mind. So I don't think we can say enough, how much we appreciate you, the work you do. But also, I'm very heartened to see the community building that goes on as well, because I think that's really the key. The SEL work, say hello to someone. I mean, that's important stuff. That builds that sense of community, that you're not just sharing a building, with each other, right? There's almost a family aspect to that. Because if we're going to find our way out of where we currently are in this world, it's going to be that generation that learns that and holds on to that as they go. So what you do, I think, will have long-lasting repercussions. So thank you.
Gayle.
Yeah, I just want to echo what my colleagues are saying. I really do appreciate everything you do for our students and keeping our schools safe. We really, really do appreciate what you guys do every day.
Shannon.
First of all, definitely want to thank you. I work in a lot of school districts across the state, and I think what you feel here is palpable in a way that is not always the case. And so just know that that is recognized and very, very, very much appreciated. Technical question, just the Informacast installation. It said 9 of the 16 schools, 7 have been installed or fully operational. What's the timeline for the other 9?
They're all, the equipment is all in there. It's just a matter of getting the hardware and testing it and bring it up to speed. So our drills are due within the next couple weeks. So what we're doing is, as we're doing the drills for our first lockdown drills of the year, is when we're starting to do that. So probably within the next couple weeks is when they'll all be coming online.
Claire and then Paul.
Again, I don't know if the SRO officers knew they would be having careers in schools with kids when you went into the police force, but it's very needed. And those relationships you build give a perspective on what a police officer is that they might not have growing up. I have a couple technical questions. Do you know offhand what the typical evacuation time is in a fire drill?
It's usually under 2 to 3 minutes that everybody's out of the building.
Okay. And then as far as police response time to a school without an SRO, is it 5 minutes or?
I would like to say that's probably not for public discussion, but I would just say it's very rapid, and I'll let them highlight that.
We're going to get there fast.
Yeah, well, okay. And then the anonymous alerts, I think, is fabulous. And when a presentation a few years back, it was stated that it was available to elementary schools. But in going on the website, safety issues are a lot of things. And on the website for the elementary schools, it's only about bullying. And I just don't know if there's a possibility of a safety question being part of that. If I were a 5th grader and knew of someone who was playing with matches and wanted to have them stop, it would be great to be able to do an anonymous alert and go to the site, and instead of it just being a bully issue, to be a safety issue, because it's not always telling about somebody. I mean, it's not always bullying, but there's safety issues that are, I wouldn't want kindergartners using it, but there are 3rd and 4th graders that know when things aren't safe. and it would be nice if they could have it.
Yeah, I took a note. We'll take a look at that. I wanted to just take an opportunity to make a public thanks to, certainly I'll begin with Chief Riddick, Assistant Chief Rickabon, Sergeant Hopkins, just amazing partners. We've talked a little bit about Minnesota. We talked about our opening, but we also had a fairly scary student safety incident with a student that was in an accident, a motor vehicle accident, on their way in, and the communication and the response, but just the communication with the West Hartford PD was so amazing, and I'm just grateful for these folks and what they do to support our community at large. So just wanted to give that public acknowledgement and thank you.
Ethan.
At the risk of restating the obvious, what everybody's already stated, I do think it's incredibly important that parents feel safe, but more importantly, kids. I know I had one of my daughters used to worry about everything, and it was great that she feels very comfortable now. So thank you.
Other comments, questions? All right. I thank you as well for what you do and for being here. I'll be fully transparent, and whenever you all come this time of year, I don't always look forward to seeing you, only because it's a reminder of the reality of why you're needed. And not only locally is it a reminder, but unfortunately what we are exposed to outside of this town and this state as well. And we know that unfortunate reality. So thank you for the seriousness for what you do. Thank you for practicing the 3 C's. And thank you for remembering that we're talking about children. We're talking about our babies. And thank you for being responsive and caring for them. And this is me speaking as a board member, but also as a mama bear who firmly believes in the essence and the need to protect all of our children. So thank you for taking that seriously as well. And thank you for all that you do. All right. Thank you. Now moving on to personnel actions. And I said, wait a minute, where's Julio going? But no,
I know, he gets a little break for a few minutes.
So, pardon. So good to see you, Ms. Shannon. And so, passing it to you. Welcome again.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So the information I'm sharing starts on page 30 in your booklet. And a lot of this I really covered in much more detail at the last meeting. So tonight I'll really just give a brief update on some of these key numbers since June. And this is something that I'll do often throughout the year, just making sure that you're informed and have regular updates related to our certified staff, our teachers and administrators. So this summer we hired 51 contracted professional staff. And in addition, we also signed 13 interim teachers. If you look through, you can see there's a very wide range of experiences that people are coming to West Hartford with. I truly enjoyed every single meeting. And whether there was excitement over someone were signing their very first professional contract and starting their career, or people that had had extensive experience in other districts and were really looking to come to West Hartford for all that we offer. It was really interesting for me just to hear their stories and see where they're coming from. Just as a reference point, interim teachers, those are positions where the teacher is anticipated to either return at some point this year or some point next year. As I've been visiting schools, I've been checking in with all of those new employees, and it's been really neat to see them up in front of students, making those connections and really becoming an important part of their school communities. We also have 3 teachers that are on a year-long leave of absence. We had 18 resignations. We always look at those numbers. It is down slightly from last year where there were 23, and the retention rate year to year for the last 4 years has been steady at either 5 or 6%. And then we had 16 retirements that happened over the summer. Any questions about anything?
All right. Thank you very much. Teammates, any questions or comments regarding our personnel update? All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Now moving on to state assessment results regarding literacy, mathematics, and science. And our teammates are coming to the table once again. Hello. Passing the mic over to Ms. Ann.
Money, you dropped that screen, I think. So as Ann sets up on that computer, I'll just introduce, obviously you all know Ann McKernan, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, and welcome to the table once again. Eileen Eustace, our Director of Secondary Education, and I know that Ann is very, very excited to be able to present this year's
I always am.
grade 3 through 8 literacy and mathematics scores, as well as the science scores, and to remind the public at home that science is tested in grades 5, 8, and 10.
Are we up yet? I see it's warming up, so just to be 1 minute. And you all know Mrs. Eustace, who's a great right hand to me in our office. Miss Behrens couldn't be with us tonight, but she sent her regards and certainly helped us with preparing the presentation. Oh, you know, one of the things I have to always check. Sometimes they pull it up.
There you go.
All right. I think she does. Very helpful. Thank you. All right. Well, we would like to share with you the state assessment results for last spring. And you may know, or you may remember, that these assessments are given usually in the March or February for science, and then the March to May timeframe for our students. And there's a long window of time where the assessments can be given. Our students generally take them in April and May. So tonight we'd like to talk a little bit about the background of the assessment, give you the overall results for the Smarter Balanced, look at how we did in our growth areas, review some key from performance of some key subgroups, look at our science results, and then talk about our next steps and open it up for discussion with all of you.
So just as a reminder, federal legislation requires assessment of students in literacy and math for grades 3 through 8 annually, as well as the science assessment 3 times during their K-12 experience. So here in Connecticut, we actually use the Smarter Balanced Assessment for literacy and mathematics, and we use the NGSS, the Next Generation Science Standards Assessment for science in grades 5, 8, and 11.
There's also a grade 11 literacy and math assessment, the SAT, and we will give those updates in our next report.
So when students actually take these assessments and they receive their scores, they basically use these achievement levels, the levels 1 through 4. And for students that score in level 3 or 4, that is considered reaching benchmark. We just want to point that out because that is for frame of reference as
and discusses the results through the presentation.
So our overall results in literacy for grades 3 through 8 combined for the last few years are shown on the screen. We had a slight uptick in literacy results last year, with some of our greatest gains coming in the middle school years in grades 6, 7, and 8, where they averaged approximately a 2.2% gain. This is, as you notice this pattern, you're going to see this pattern throughout the report where there were some higher scores prior to the disruptions, followed by some lower scores, and now a gradual return, slow return up to the higher levels. In mathematics, we see a slightly different, a similar pattern, but a slightly different pattern in that, I'll go back one slide. In literacy, there was very flat results from the 2015 to 2018-19 time frame, and then a dip, and now we're a slow recovery. In math, it was a little bit different, and that may be because our district had named an area of focus as math. So you'll see in this slide, the bar graph shows that we were moving in a steady upward pattern prior to the disruptions. We had, lower scores immediately following that, and now we are on a steady path back upwards in all of the grades. This year's gain was a smaller one at only 0.4%, so basically a flat, but we are seeing increases each year, so we are pleased to see even slight increases getting us further and further towards our goals. Again, the greatest increases were in grade 6 with a 4.2% increase, and grade 8. Oh, I do want to point out, thank you, Eileen, for reminding me. These are our highest results ever with SBAC. Just a slight higher with 0.3, but we like to take a pause and say teachers work very hard on this. We talk constantly about many factors. I'll talk about them at the end when we wrap everything up. But this is our outcomes, closing the achievement gap. These are our daily conversations in our office. Strategies, better teaching strategies, decisions about classes, levels, courses. This is ongoing in our office every day. So when we even see a 0.3, the best score by 0.3, we're very pleased to see our highest scores ever in math in Smarter Balanced. Last year, I think it was Mr. Goldman asked me for a breakdown by level, which I thought was a clever way to look at it. And I was also pleased that you asked me because last year I gave you a supplement, but this year I put it right in the report, so thank you for that. But this chart shows us, and this is the one I had to correct for you that I handed out to you. But what we were pleased to see when we looked at the performance levels are that level 1, where our students are furthest off grade level, there was a decrease in the number of students scoring at level 1 in literacy, and a decrease in the students scoring at level 1 in math. At the same time, if you look at level 4, those students are scoring above grade level, so they're meeting and exceeding expectations. We see an increase in students of 60 students scoring in the highest band, and also an increase in the number of math students scoring in the highest band from last year to this year. So the good news is we're seeing a decrease here in level 1 and an increase in level 4. And that's really important. We certainly, even if you're several years, 2 or 3 years below grade level, making that progress towards that grade level standards is really important and needs to be celebrated. So thank you, Mr. Goldman, for asking for this last year. Appreciate that. Going on, the state not only reports performance by bands, they also report growth, student growth. So Connecticut Smarter Balance assessments, as I said, they not only report performance but growth. The growth model is designed to be an ambitious but achievable target, and the state sets that target at 60%. So what they're hoping is that students achieve at least 60% of the target. 60% of the students achieve the target. The target is based on their actual student growth data, so they'll look at a student's performance in the prior year on the scale score, and they will look at the student's performance the current year on the scale score and look at that growth. Each student has an individualized target to meet. and the percentage of the target they do meet contributes to this score. So Connecticut sets this ambitious target at 60%, and you can see that each year we do achieve that. Some years very close to it. This year was a good year in literacy in that it was our highest growth target, our highest percentage hitting the growth target. And in mathematics, it was a little bit lower than last year, but well over the 60%. Moving on to how we're performing relative to other groups in the state of Connecticut and our DIRG-B schools. I might want to remind you just before I move to this slide, we like to look at how we compare to the state, but also to similar districts. Now, the state doesn't use DIRG-B any longer as a comparison, but it is a good group to say, well, there's 160 towns in the state. How are we doing versus towns that are more like us? And that's what we like to look at. So we look at the old DIRG-B schools, and then we average their results as well to see how we're doing relative. So this chart shows our literacy results for several years, and you will see the pattern I described before, that for the state, for West Hartford and for DIRG-B, the state is in blue, West Hartford is in orange, and DIRG-B is in green. The results for literacy were relatively flat from 2015-16 to 18-19. DIRG-B saw a decline, we saw a decline, and so did the state. And now we're seeing the recovery towards that. In literacy, West Hartford has traditionally performed 15 to 16 points higher than the state, and we're maintaining about that same distance. In terms of DIRG-B, our gap has been from about 4 to 6 points throughout the time, never really exceeding less than 7 points in DIRG, and never getting much more closer than 4. So it's been a very consistent pattern in the literacy in almost every way. We haven't seen real closings, we haven't seen real openings of the gap, a lot of several years of flat and down, and then slowly returning. I'm encouraged by this, even though it is, you might say, well, we're 6 points below the DIRG, but it's important for me to let you know that DIRG-B schools, West Hartford is probably significantly different than many DIRG-B schools. Our composition of students with free and reduced lunch and ELL students is much higher than the average for all of those schools. For instance, in free and reduced lunch, DIRG-B schools average 17%, and West Hartford averages 28%. So we have significantly more students who have, some needs when it comes to their education and some additional supports. We have higher ELL population and higher free and reduced lunch population, yet we are maintaining very close to the DIRG average. In math, the story is even a little more encouraging. You see that the state was on an upward trend before the disruption, as well as the DIRG, and there was a slight decline, and now we are up to 62.7%, and that is actually really closing the gap. So the difference between our schools and DIRG-B back in 2015-16 was 8 to 10 points, and now it's approximately 5 points. So we are starting to close that, and I do credit all of our very named and thoughtful efforts to look at our mathematics instruction through many lenses that I could talk to you about for a very long time. But we are seeing our highest results, a closing of the gap with the DIRG, and growth measures that outperform, that meet and exceed the state expectation. We are continuing to keep about a 15 to 18 point difference with the state over this time period. I'd like to talk about our high needs students and how they fared on this assessment. Our high needs students, just as a reminder, are defined as students who have any one of the following three, who fall into any one of the following three designations. They are students who have disabilities and are being serviced by our Pupil Services Department. They may receive free or reduced price lunch, or they have English language learner needs and are in our ESOL program. When comparing our students, our high-need students with the state, you'll see that West Hartford students do outperform students with high needs throughout the state in both math and literacy. But this is just one way of looking at the data. There's many, many ways. We also look at our gap between our non-high need students and our high need students, and that gap is much more significant. So the state gap is approximately 45 points between high need students and non-high need students. And West Hartford's gap is approximately 49 points. So we are still struggling to close gaps between our non-high need students and our high need students. So the non-high need students have none of these designations. Moving on to looking at our data through the lens of race and ethnicity, we see that same pattern, a higher mark, a disruption, and a lower mark. I had to only do a few years here because of the way the data was presented on Ed's site, so I couldn't do as many years there. But we are seeing in literacy, the groups are showing modest increases, much like the trend for the whole district. Modest increases after higher scores back in 2018-19. However, we are starting to, we saw last year and again this year a slight lowering of the achievement gap for students of color with the all group by about two points over the last few years, and we're hoping to continue that trend. Literacy has been the tougher of the two assessed areas to make gains. So we continue to look at our approaches in literacy, although it is certainly, as you could see on all of the graphs, the state is struggling with the same, and so is the DIRG. So it's definitely a challenge we are all facing and working very hard to address. In mathematics, the same general pattern, although we have since 2017 shrunk the achievement gap for students of color with the all group by about 3.5 points, and we want to continue that effort as well. We do see about a 20-point gap between the all student group and the students of color. Again, an area of focus that we continue to work on and will continue to look for and find solutions. I'd like to just flip over to science, which is the other assessment. It's called the Next Generation Science Standards Test. And this test, there's no growth data because it's only given in grades 5, 8, and 11. So we can't give the test every year, so you can't measure growth like that. But the Next Generation Science Standards, we saw increases in grades, we saw a slight decrease in performance in grade 5. We're performing well above the state average there. In grade 8, we saw an increase of 1.5 percentage points, and in grade 11, we saw an increase of 2.8 percentage points. And as I dug into the data a little more, there are two other interesting pieces I wanted to share with you that I thought you might find not only interesting but encouraging. Is in looking at our students of color and looking at our high need students, our students of color. This is the area we have the narrowest achievement gap. So our achievement gap might be 20% in literacy or math, and it was 17 and 18% for these groups, which I thought was encouraging and interesting. There's a lot of content in science that relies heavily on vocabulary, and I would think that tracking with the reading I was surprised, not surprised, but interesting to see such a heavy reading test. Thought it might be very similar to the exact reading scores, but it was actually narrower. And then a real point of celebration, I don't even think I've told Paul about yet, is at one point I downloaded all the scores from all the districts in the grade 11 test just to see how we were doing, because our high school score is quite good. And I remembered a few years ago we looked at this. There were 128 districts I could compare to. Some districts are so small, they have suppressed data and you can't get it. they don't release it because they have fewer than 40 students, so they in any level, so they don't release it. But of the 128 districts that had science scores in grade 11, West Hartford had the 18th highest performance, which is the top 14% in the state. So I wanted to take a moment to thank all of the people who work with the children, but maybe take an extra moment to thank our science team who has very specific content. They work with the students, and I thought that was a real point of pride. I think in the past we've been in the top 20%, but to be down to 14, I thought was quite good. It was a happy note. I actually saw that statistic. Well, you know, you can spend hours doing this, as you can imagine, and we do, but I found that one later on. So our focus for the upcoming school year, we have really put a lot of effort into training our leaders in effective professional learning community strategies and approaches. We've sent several people this summer, and we continue to send them in the fall. They're coming out very energized because they understand very clearly through the PLC process, all students means all. All means all. In PLC, you look at student work. Not in isolation, perhaps in your teacher office correcting papers by yourself, but with others where you get conversation, you have brainstorming, and you hopefully change instruction to meet the needs of the students. So we're very excited about that effort. We have worked hard with Melissa Caballero and Kelly Browse's office have been huge proponents of trying very hard to work with schedules and help us get pupil services staff and ESOL, and also on the ESOL department into PLC meetings as often as possible, and certainly when needed. If they can't be at all of the PLCs, they can be when needed, so they can be another expert to talk about strategies on how to pull small groups to address concerns or how to advance student learning when students are soaring. We are focusing, of course, on a student's sense of belonging, encouraging them to think about their personal growth, their personal success, and how they feel in school so that they can be successful. We talk regularly. The high school principals and the middle school principals are very committed to talking to students individually about, as Mr. Duarte was when he was a principal, about enrolling in higher level classes. Challenge yourself. Take a course. Have you tried this before? We can help you. We've also looked over the last few years, especially in the middle school. Melissa Caballero and I have looked at collapsing course levels where appropriate, encouraging students to be in higher level courses, specifically in the developmental math courses at the middle schools and in a reading course in the middle school as well. Consistently looking to address the literacy issue at incorporating high interest texts that resonates with who they are as a person and also their interests. We are trying very hard and have found so many pockets of success all over the district. So in looking at the data, you'll see classrooms where the achievement gap is half of the district for any particular group, students of color or high needs students. And so I talk to those teachers, I call them, what do you think made the difference? What did you do differently this year? Can you help me figure this out? And they've been really thoughtful and helpful to tell me how effective professional learning communities are or what else they need. And I think when we identify promising practices, we have the teachers right here to talk to. They were so great to talk to. I identified a group out of King Philip this year and called them up. And when I saw the results, I said, you know, your results for high needs kids, the gap was half it was for the state and for the town. What do you think it was? And they were so thrilled to talk about it. So thrilled to tell me what they think it was. But what I was most encouraged was they said, call me next year because if I can replicate it, I'll know it's really real. So I really like that. And finally, we have worked hard to bring coherence of efforts across all our departments. And we will continue to focus on these areas. So with that, I open it up for discussion.
Right, thank you very much. Teammates, questions? Yes, Jason.
So thank you so much for this. I mean, it seems like we continued that rebound from COVID. I'm just curious, though, and I know it's a statewide, probably a nationwide issue, but what is it about the literacy that makes that so much harder to rebound? I mean, it looks like the dip was longer and then the climb back has been much slower.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a variety of answers that we can't prove yet, but we certainly believe students aren't reading as much outside of school at all. In fact, this is a little bit of just anecdotal observation, but, reading has always been like one of the activities you could do at home. And I don't think extra math problems, except for Paul, was an activity you normally would do at home when you were a kid. But reading, obviously the very talented math children might want to try. But, you always said to the kids when they get home, well, you can watch a little TV or you can finish your homework or go out and play, but, then maybe you should read before bed or read here or there. And I really think that is definitely fallen off. And if you look at what the Common Core State Standards are really asking on these assessments, they're really asking for reading on grade level and having wide vocabulary. Those are two of the most important things it asks for, is to expanding vocabulary at every grade level and reading text on grade level. And I think that is one of the biggest pieces. Another piece which might have contributed some of the flatness in the scores prior to the disruption, you may know that the state has talked a lot and has made great efforts to change the early literacy approach through the science of reading instead of through other methods that we had used in the past, which really relied on leveled text. So your child might come home with, I'm a G level book, and I'm going to keep reading at a just right level, which had some merit. Certainly you don't want a child to be frustrated reading above grade level where they get stopped and they don't want to do it anymore. But there's new thinking about, there's definitely new thinking about more emphasis on the 5 elements of reading and more emphasis on not leveling children into certain categories, but allowing them exposure to more complex texts. So I think that exploration of the science of reading was a long time in coming. It wasn't a reaction to anything. This was from the early 2000s. People had been saying, we need more of an emphasis on some of the basics of reading, the font. And I don't mean swing back to all basics by any means, because it can be a pendulum swinging this way or this way, but more of a balance. And so the state has, launched that about 2 years ago now, and we are implementing. So I don't know if I can completely answer your question, but I do think that some of the flatness, you saw it across all groups prior, was an inability for some students to really reach that. And I do feel that the drop-off in recreational reading and challenging reading is a big part.
So I think that the PSA is kids need to read at home, parents need to be reading to their kids from an early age. What do we do to message that? Because we've talked a lot about, the anxious generation or screenagers and the anxiety caused by screens. We don't often, at least I haven't heard it as much, of this drop-off in literacy because of the fact that, everybody's on screens.
Yeah, I think we have a lot to do. I think we have a lot to rethink. We have great library media specialists who are tremendous at promoting reading, but Eileen is working with them this year. The secondary folks, and Melissa Behrens works with the elementary folks. But I think that they're key to it. I think giving permission, again, re-emphasizing the importance of reading at all times, re-emphasizing the importance of reading at home. Sometimes you're reading in learning lab, let's say in the middle school. We've had an effort this year in the middle school. I think Paul shared with you that students used to pick up their Chromebooks and walk around and have them with them all times. And now we are going back to, you'll have an assigned Chromebook from your teacher for every class, but you don't pick it up and use it until asked. And I think that might give the opportunity to say, we're not going to pick them up in language lab or learning lab today. Maybe it's time to read. And so I think we have to re-message and commit to that. That's just one step I think we need to take.
LaToya. Yeah, kind of to add on to that a little bit. Well, one, I'm excited to see how relationships impact some of these outcomes here. I'm really excited, especially with this push to really view the relationship building from a tier 1 level and go hard on that. So I'm excited to see how that reshapes some things. But thinking about the reading, because it is so critical. One of the things this summer, we had the back to school book bag giveaway. And I have a used bookstore / community space in town, and put out a table, gave out 200 books for free to all, pretty much all communities of color. And it was like families and their students got books. It wasn't just for the kids. I told the parents they could get books too. They were so excited. So many families, so many students were like, oh my goodness, like you have Spanish books. They're pointing the characters on the books that look like them. The parents are like, Barnes and Noble's right there, but we can't afford those books and we don't have time to go to the library. And, you know, like there's no place where we can just get free books. So I think one of the things is access. Yeah, people are on screens, but if you're in a household where your parents working, you know, 2 jobs and you don't have a library at home, that can be difficult. And so I thought about just at that event how I was not expecting like all of the books to get taken. And just because I said these books are free, I mean, students and their parents were taking books and they were so excited. And parents were like, I'm excited to read. I never get to read. And here's this free book. And like, so it just made me think a lot about access and wondering what we can do about that. I'm going to keep giving away books, but maybe we can think about this from a community standpoint.
Thank you for helping. I appreciate that. I often think, and these weren't free books, but I often think of how excited my children were to get to the book fairs that the schools have. And I remember during, when we started to shut down, some of the librarians had outside tables where kids could come and check them out because they weren't in school. So I think we do have to look at every aspect, but I hate to say a good old-fashioned push on reading. I don't think that would ever hurt us. Even if it never resulted in one more point of score, I don't think it would hurt us, period. And I do think we want to rediscover that. And we'll be talking to folks about it. I have a colleague in another district that had a particular push in her middle school classroom and involved parents, called them and said, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, please support me. So possibly some of those efforts as well.
Other questions? Ethan.
Yeah, a couple questions. The first one is, I understand level 4, I understand level 3. What is level 1? How do you define that, or how would I understand that?
So this side would say that the child is not, level 1 is they're not showing signs of doing any of the grade level work. They're not showing signs they're approaching the grade level work. Level 2.
Are they like 2 grades below, or?
They don't give you a really clear distinction, but I think you can assume they're definitely at least 1 grade below because they're not showing in all of their work. They're just not indicating that their work is on grade level or even approaching it. And the state doesn't hold true that approaching is 1 below or not approaching is 2 or more, but I think that in general, you might be able to think like that. So approaching grade level targets is 2. It might be you're showing some of your answers or some of your work seems to get there at times, but on whole, you're not really meeting the target. But grade 3 is solidly in the target, and grade 4 is exceeding that.
Okay. No, thank you. That was helpful. I remember a couple years ago it being mentioned with, I think it was during COVID, but maybe after COVID, you all were doing something special for math that was successful, I thought was the impression. I didn't know if you could do something like that for literacy.
Well, and I'll let Paul take it because he was here for it, but it was a named area of focus, so.
Yeah, I mean, literacy we've been talking about for a while, and I think, you know, Ann's point about ensuring that reading is still happening to the degree, but one of the things I looked at, you know, one of the confounding variables, and it's just our challenge, you know, as Ann mentioned, you know, Dergby and West Hartford, it's the group that we like to compare ourselves to, but we really look nothing like Dergby, especially when you consider, as Ann, one statistic Ann mentioned was the percentage of students with socioeconomic need. That's part of our high needs population. Yeah. We've talked about our growing students with specialized learning needs within special education, and we've also talked about our growing numbers of multilingual families, students that are learning the English language, and therefore a grade level test, especially set at a high standard. It's a high 1-year benchmark, and where we really look at the effectiveness of those programs is looking at those students over multiple years. Over the period of performance where our literacy scores have either been flat or certainly had this slow rebound coming out of COVID, those are the years in which, year over year over year, we're increasing our students with high needs. So we have a greater density of them. When you disaggregate it, what's promising is that our high needs population this last year had the second highest growth that they've ever achieved. And it's interesting, Ann, showed it in the aggregate for math. The growth wasn't as strong, and yet for math, what was interesting to me on one of the slides, and if you go to the next slide, actually, with the DIRG, West Hartford is the only district, the state hasn't achieved its highest ever. The state's highest ever performance was in 1819. They haven't yet come 100% back yet. The DIRG B highest ever was in 1819. For us, we were essentially tied with our highest ever last year, and now we've done slightly better. So it's interesting that our math achievement is the highest we've ever had, but we actually had slower growth in math than we did for literacy overall and for our high needs population. Our high needs population, they had their second highest growth ever, but they're the group that we, when you disaggregate it, that I think we want the most focus and attention on. And the trouble, of course, is it's not a one-year measure. Right. I'm not gonna take a child who doesn't yet know the English language and make them proficient at the grade level test in a single year. And truthfully, often by the time they're achieving that proficiency, we're no longer getting credit for them in the high needs population because they've exited out. So so the aggregate's a tough number to necessarily look at and expect that it's going to tell the whole story.
Actually, I thought the best number was the number how level 1 dropped.
Yeah, and I think that's evidence of some of the real growth. Both the level 1 dropping, that's evident when we're getting students who are struggling to reach grade level, and we're getting more of them out of level 1, which is sort of saying, yeah, you're not there, to okay, you're now approaching. Yeah. That's one of the ways that you manifest sort of the picture of some of the growth, because as Ann said, the growth measures are really hard to get the. I remember when I was in Ann's seat, I had to really look at how the state defined it, and it's that 60th percentile, which really means this: if there are 10 of us, if all 10 of us took the Smarter Balance test 2 years in a row, and we looked at how each one of us, how much we grew, what they would say is, well, rather than take the average amount of growth of the 10 of you, what we're going to do is we're going to put you in order from highest growth to lowest growth, and we're going to take the 60th percentile. So we're going to take the person fourth from the top and say everybody needs to achieve at that level. Well, that's kind of crazy because you've got 60% below you, but that's the level of growth that we want to set. And so that's the target that the state uses. It's an aspirational and aggressive target, and so we don't shy from it in the same way that we don't shy from DIRG B comparisons. But it's the recognition of how high that bar is.
Yeah, I just thought somebody getting out of level 1 is more important than this. Yeah.
I really have to thank you again because you asked for that, and I gave the information last year in the supplement. And then I thought this year when I was putting together that would be a good thing to include. I'd like to see, I don't like to see 700 children in year. There are over 4,000 test takers, by the way. So, but I don't like to see 700, but I see us going into the 600s now. So okay, let's keep moving our level 1s to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. That's really the goal, is growth, and that's why the growth measures are so important.
With the level 1 going to level 2 could mean a whole difference in life.
If students make their growth targets each year, a student who started in level 1, if they make their individualized growth target every year, they would be on grade level by 6th or, it's not going to happen a 3rd grader on grade level by 4th or even 5th, but if you're starting in a low 1, but by 6th, if you made it every year, you could get to level 3, I think I'd have to look at a chart, but I think 6th grade.
The last question I had unrelated to that is the science results. Is there something that happens with the 8th grade? Because that score, I think it was 8th grade, yeah. You went from 66.3 to 59.9 and then 73.5. Is it a test?
Well, they had an increase this year, and they are certainly off their highs of prior to
It's just it's so much
instruction.
down.
Oh, from fifth
the other
grade,
two.
yeah. Yeah, it's a harder test to compare because not only it's not the same cohort, it's several years. But the general trend of the fifth grade performing better, and then the eighth grade a little lower, and then the high school is really, really high.
Yeah.
I can't emphasize how
That's
much
great.
that's a great score. But that's actually somewhat of a trend in the reading and literacy too. You see higher percentage of students perform at grade level in elementary school, generally in reading and math as well. That dips a little through the middle years for 100 reasons we could both research and think about and have experienced, and then they go up. One of our discussions in our office is quite a bit is how do you even out that dip, right? What can you do to make that dip? Maybe it's a natural consequence of going to a bigger school and going through puberty and all the things we think it could be, but how do we still intervene, at least make that a little flatter, right? They are going through quite a bit at that age. They are going from a small elementary school with one teacher to a fairly good sized middle school with 7-8 teachers a day. So our goal often is we look a lot at the 5th to 6th grade transition and see if we can smooth that dip a little bit, because I think that's really successful when your 6th graders are performing very close to your 5th graders, and then they can start moving back up.
Okay, thank you.
We also, by the way, on another note there, we also have about a 10% change in the population between 5th and 6th grade, with some students selecting private schools, or it might be an opportunity to move because, I was waiting until the child finished that level, completed. And we also get about 10% new kids in at that level too. So that's probably one of the places you have the biggest change in actual population. So it's
You
hard
can't
to
really
say those
cherry
5th graders are these 8th graders.
All right, thank you.
Claire. So one thing just wanted to point out, the score of 1 includes kids, there's no 0. So you could freak out, answer 2 questions, and that's it. You also could be your first year in an English school, and then only 1% of our population is exempt. So you've got... Yeah, the alternate test. So with a 20% special ed population, you've got 19% of the kids taking the test have IEPs. And so that really will impact that group. The other thing is, I love how you keep comparing the DIRG, and even though it's not really a measurement, but I think it keeps the bar high. It also points out that we're at almost 20% special ed population, and if I'm not mistaken, they're in the teens. I think it's like 15%.
I didn't do their average. I did it for Freedom just because I just know that one is always going to stand out, and I could have done it for Yale. I did not do it for special education, but I did it for Free and Reduced Lunch because I just know. If
Yeah,
you
you
look at
know.
the towns, you'll say, oh, this town is not an inner ring suburb to a city. It is much more rural or suburban. You see the names of the towns, and they're lovely towns doing really great work, but they're different makeup.
Right.
And I know the ESOL population we have is double most of those.
Exactly.
Towns. So I just shared that one statistic, but in all 3 statistics, we have a higher percentage.
I'd also be curious about whether you can separate girls and boys in the 8th grade, because there has been a trend, and I don't know if you see that trend, but typically girls in elementary school are still gung-ho, working really hard in science, and then for some reason there's this fall off in middle school where they don't have as much excitement, and then they get it back in high school. And I don't know why that trend happens, but...
We can absolutely disaggregate by every factor. I haven't done
Yeah.
gender just because there's so many choices
And then-
to do, but I could look. But I definitely could look at that.
Yeah. And then just wanted to say that identifying the promising practices is so important. And I'm glad you look at that, because we have great curriculum. There's a lot of good curriculum writers. You know, the state sometimes uses West Hartford staff to help write good curriculum. But then there's things that teachers do, and there's unique tricks, and to look at that data, look at teams that work well together, all that stuff. I think it's really important to see those trends, because there's little secrets and things that people are doing that are getting good results.
Absolutely, and we have really talented people out there, and one of the challenges we have, Eileen and I, and Melissa work on it a lot, is when you have promising practices, how do you scale that everywhere? That's a challenge. There's turnover, there's constant turnover. Shannon was just here talking, there are 51 new teachers, right? So sometimes new people are coming in. You have changes sometimes in leadership, a real steady leader has moved on to their rewards, and so you're resetting messages, but our job is to try to even out as much of that as possible, make sure the curriculum's solid, that our messaging on instruction is strong, that our professional learning is supportive, and that we have a vision for the future. And I'm very much right now is focusing on getting teachers to collaborate together around the PLC table with student work at the center, and a very clear picture of what students should have, what the target was to learn in that unit, and then to what extent did students master that, and what are their plans. That's probably the heart of our improvement efforts.
Other questions or comments? Gayle.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I had a question about the testing that we're using to make these assessments. One I think is called Smarter Balance and Next Generation. So my question is, are these testing that is sort of coming from the state of Connecticut, or is this federal, or?
Yeah. There's a legislation, Eileen started with that in the beginning, that in 2015, and for years before that, there was some form of legislation that said you had to test students X number of times per year. Way back when I was first a teacher, we tested students in grades 4, 6, and 8. You may remember those. You're probably all students at the time. So grades 4, 6, and 8, you tested students, and then once in high school in 10, and that was called the Connecticut Mastery Test, or the Connecticut Academic Performance Test. And then lots of iterations on law. No Child Left Behind, as you famously heard about, brought in yearly testing in grades 3 through 8 and once in high school. Connecticut famously actually sued the federal government, said, we like our every other year testing. We lost. And then we tested every year. So yes, these are, the federal government says you must have a test. And it must be in these grades, in these subjects, and once in high school, you can pick where. And then the states choose which test they think from. Obviously, they may have a consortium that makes their own test. Smarter Balance is a national consortium that made assessments based on the Common Core state standards.
So I think what I'm asking is the state mandating that we use?
Yes.
So every district in Connecticut uses these tests?
That's why it's such good comparison information.
Federal requirement to test, and then Connecticut has selected the tests that it uses to meet the federal requirement.
Okay. One of the things that we used to talk about in testing was that sometimes testing, depending on the child, can be, there can be cultural differences where kids have trouble understanding testing, and that's why I was interested in the testing, because could that in any way skew our results? But if you're telling me that we're all using the same testing, then maybe it's.
They've also, I will say, since they've gone to a digital platform, there are many more accommodations that are available for students. Every year they're coming out with additional accommodations, particularly because it is in a digital platform. So there's opportunities for a student to take the test and toggle back and forth between English and Spanish. There's, all different types of other, for a student that has print disability or other types of disabilities to actually accommodate for that. And I will say the digital platform has really helped with that. So there's speech to text, there's text to speech, there's the opportunity for it's unlimited time. And we also have a very large window with which to give it. While each school will designate certain days, the nice thing too is that we have a window of time to be able to give it. So if students need more time, they can test over a period of time as well.
And I'll offer that I've served on the state has a committee for assessment and accountability, but I've gotten to meet some of the people from like Smarter. It's they have psychometricians. They do bias reviews. It's not a couple of people in Hartford that have taken a few hours to write a test. It's a whole scientific approach to it.
Other questions or comments? I would just say thank you very much for the information. Just 2 points I would like to make. One, I appreciate, Gayle, very much your insight regarding testing and how it impacts those who are taking the test and the challenges that may be. And I think what we certainly know, there's always area of growth for how the tests are implemented. It's not so much the students themselves that have difficulty, it's how they're constructed. And that's where the cultural bias can come into play. So that's why who is constructing the test is so very important, which brings me to the point as well. I so appreciate when you present this information in talking about the achievement gaps / opportunity gaps, how that continues to be highlighted, because appreciate from the information when you look at the reporting out based on race and ethnicity, but when you disaggregate in terms of socioeconomic need, that there is an improvement in the results. And that again just shows the opportunity gaps and how that is certainly something that will benefit all. So my oh my, to have an opportunity to receive free or to receive additional ways of expanding your reading is one way of many ways to support growth of all students. So thank you so very much thank you for yours. And with that, we shall go on to routine matters, where we have approval of the minutes. Seeking a motion that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting of September the 2nd, 2025. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Shannon. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, LaToya. Any suggested edits? Seeing none, all of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? The ayes have it. Now moving on to information and reports. Board members, do we have any communications and reports from other boards or organizations to share on? Seeing none, do we have any other information or discussions? Seeing none, looking into future business. Announcement of future meeting dates. Our next meeting will be on Tuesday, October the 21st, 2025, here in room 314 at the Town Hall. Again, we just have one meeting in the month of October. That once again is Tuesday, October the 21st, followed by Wednesday, November the 5th. Again, that's a Wednesday, November the 5th, 2025, here in room 314 at the Town Hall at 7 p.m. Then followed by Tuesday, November the 18th in room 314 at the Town Hall at 6 p.m. Again, the meeting on Tuesday, November the 18th will be at 6 p.m. here in room 314 at the Town Hall. Do we have any requests for future agenda items? Seeing none, do we have any visitors who would like to make a comment? Seeing none, we do not have an executive session. Pardon me, therefore seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Ethan. Seconded by Shannon. Meeting adjourned.